TV, and a brave woman enters a restaurant without first looking it up online. This is the Onion Week in Review. The World Wildlife Fund quickly backtracked Thursday from a recently released press statement saying panda ears are, quote, absolutely delicious. Organization officials noted that while panda ears do taste amazing braised, steamed, fried, or cooked in an omelet, they should not have announced it publicly, nor should they have ever eaten any part of a cheetah, giraffe, or Bengal tiger, no matter how good they may be. According to company sources, the Netflix board of directors held a tense series of meetings earlier this morning to decide whether the fantasy comedy Michael is stream-worthy. The board reportedly sat through its mandatory 2 back-to-back screenings of the 1996 film starring John Travolta as an angel visiting Earth, all while passionately arguing over the film's story, acting, and level of enjoyment upon subsequent viewings to determine if the movie should be available through its instant viewing program.
This is the Onion News Network.
You can help spread the ideas of liberty with our Patreon for just $5 per month at amps.freetalklive.com.
Free Talk Live.
It is Free Talk Live. You can join us 603-283-6160 if you want to do that. Again, the number is 603-283-6160. With you tonight, it's Aria.
And Mr. Penguin.
And we will be joined at some point in the near future by Jay Noon, who I haven't really seen since prison. And I'm anxious to talk with him about this. I saw him at the Porcupine Freedom Festival, but the only occasion on which I saw him, he was giving a presentation of his children, or at least his child. I don't know how many children he has, but he was giving this presentation, and I think I just heard knocking if you want to go check that. He was giving a presentation about his child, helping him with like bringing in chicken eggs and stuff like that. And it was an awesome presentation, and I obviously did not want to interrupt it to go and say hello. And because of how the Porcupine Freedom Festival is, regrettably, I did not see him any other time during that entire festival. And of course, that's very frustrating because Jay Noon has been a longtime friend of mine, and I was correct. That was knocking we heard, and that was Jay showing up here. I was just telling people, Jay, and I realize that you're still sitting down and everything, but I was just telling people about how the only time I saw you since I've been out of prison was at PorcFest, and you happened to be giving a presentation that showed your child helping you around your farm with like chicken eggs and some other things. I didn't stay and watch the presentation because I had my dog with me at the time or whatever. So it's great to see you. And could you tell us a bit about that presentation? Because I didn't get to see it, but it seemed fascinating. And I love that idea of libertarians not just teaching their children textbook facts, but actually raising them to be productive members of society.
Well, and that's not a libertarian thing. That is a long time, we need to survive thing.
Fair enough.
200 years ago, if your kids weren't like useful and doing whatever they could at their age, there was probably a real good chance in New Hampshire, Maine, or Vermont, or anywhere in the north, you might not have enough food to get through winter. Someone, might not make it through winter because there's not enough food. There wasn't like an EBT card in a grocery store we could all fall back on, back then. So that was my presentation on how not to F up your kids that I did at Anarchapulco. And I got invited down to Anarchapulco this winter to give that presentation, and I got a lot of really good feedback from it. But basically, the bottom line of that presentation is, a real quick wrap-up on it, and I believe actually Chris watched this presentation. I did the same presentation at Liberty Forum at the Alt Expo room. And the thing is I want people to understand that like their best return on investment for investing in your children is before they're 6 years old, before they're 7 years old. That is when they are going to like learn 3 or 4 languages very easy. That is where they're going to, and my idea is let's get them to earn their dopamine hit doing something physical, doing something for real, doing what, these.
You mean not getting them from Instagram likes?
Correct.
Okay,
right.
wow.
That's a free
what a novel
hit.
concept.
Right. Right. So, and in my presentation, I talk about how internet devices are essentially cocaine to the pre-6-year-old brain.
Yeah, and to the adult brain, sadly.
Well, it is, but it's really, really powerful, the dopamine hit that kids get off of interacting with an internet device, whether it's playing like a full-out violent video game or it's like a really good, wholesome, we're going to learn how to count, learn how to talk, learn how to spell, learn how to, like, you know, do all kinds of things. And the internet's really good at that because it does capture it's and the attention of the kids. And so in my How Not to F Up Your Kids, I think it's really important. And I didn't really, you know, I think it's really important that our kids be useful, productive, and valuable to other people in society.
Yeah. I mean, it sounds like a cold way of viewing it, but that's not. And I really think that if everyone sat down and thought about what you said, they would completely agree with you.
Yes.
Because the way that we demonstrate value to ourselves, the way that we thrive in society is by being valuable to other people.
Yeah, whether you're living in the age of abundance, which I'm going to call right now,
absolutely,
and my
we
entire
throw away
life,
more food than we eat.
Right, my entire life has been the age of abundance. So whether you live in the age of abundance or you live in, let's say, Mad Max, a dystopian Mad Max world where, like, you know, it's really bad and really hard to survive, if you are more valuable alive to everyone around you, not only are you going to survive, but you're also going to thrive. You know, whatever the, you know, particular situation is going on. So I want my kids and my kids' peers to be useful because that is going to make the world a way better place for me, all of us sitting here and everyone listening in 20 years, 15 years, 30 years. And also, I didn't really quite have this thought until, I don't know, I was my daughter was a few hours old and I was holding her and I was just like overwhelmed with, wow, like I just, you know, you guys haven't had kids and held your kids, but, you know, it's something that's very hard to explain and you're not going to understand until you do it. And anyways, you know, I don't think I could love anything more than love my kids. And I never felt so much like of that kind of feeling. And I was thinking to myself, so one of my friends like kind of cracks a joke and he's got a few kids. And years ago we were talking about, you know, if your daughter is a stripper, you failed as a father. And so I sent him some pictures of my daughter. He's like, so you got a plan to keep her off a pole in 20 years? And I'm like, well, I'm not worried about that at all. But what I am concerned about is there going to be like a man, you know, that's going to be like a good, you know, useful, you know, what I would, you know, call it, you know, a real man, a testosterone driven man that's masculine, you know, for my daughter. And so I really started just thinking about this stuff and how I sort of applied like, well, all right, I'm going to raise these piglets. So I want to feed them good food. I want to keep them, you know, healthy. I want to give them all the right things so they're good at kind of how do I get this result that I'm looking for, you know, for my kids. And I've also took it a step further and started a homeschool co-op. So I'm applying this same theory, this same, you know, what I'm doing here of making all of my daughter's peers, or giving them the ability to be useful. So one of the things I talk about in the in the slideshow presentation, How Not to F Up Your Kids, I talk about the internet devices rewiring the brains.
Right.
So what happens is the neurological pathways from the frontal lobe make their way to the rest of the brain at like, you know, from like a 6-8 months, a year old till about 7 years old. And that's basically the frontal lobe is wired. Where the frontal lobe gets wired to the brain depends on what part of the brain is being stimulated. So when a kid is, you know, feeding animals, playing in the dirt, you know, running around Rogers Campground, you know, having fun with all the other kids, playing at the swing set, even in the condo inside the city, playing with its media table where they get to set up these little plastic tables and it's got this media in which it's like sand or something or like little plastic pebbles or, you know, and the kids play with it. My kids play with grain and hay and dirt and real rocks outside, but we live, you know, on a few acres out in the woods. And
so just some sort of physical stimulation kind of thing?
Just doing things kids should be doing and have been doing before the internet existed makes the neurological pathways strong between the frontal lobe and the basal ganglia region of the brain, which is really important because that is how we learned how to, you know, not pick up spiders that'll kill us or, you know, mess with saber-toothed tigers and, you know, things like that to survive. Well, today, what's happening with a lot of the kids is they're, according to the National Institute for Health, in 2021, the average 3 to 9 year old and 13 to 19 year old. I don't know why they leave the 11 and 12 year olds out of it. Were on the internet 9 hours a day, according to metadata.
I believe it.
These internet providers.
Because I met a friend at Pork Fest who I brought him up for the festival, and I was dismayed by the amount of time that he was glued to his phone. Pretty much every waking moment of every day. And it wasn't...
How old is this fella?
25, 26, something
Young
like
man.
that.
Yep.
The right age to have been raised, steeped in technology, and that's pretty much what happened. But it wasn't even like playing a game or being on Instagram and getting likes or Facebook and getting likes. He was just chatting with people on Discord. I'm like, hey, there's 3,000 people here.
Right.
You could go and chat with, and he would just end up at some hangout spot.
You don't get a dopamine hit from talking to somebody in the flesh. He gets it through the device.
But you should get it from talking to someone in the flesh. And I don't understand the mentality of going to one of these hangout spots and then just sitting there on your phone chatting on Discord all night. Surrounded by people who you could chat with, but instead you're glued to your phone.
Yep. So, anyways, back to the highest frequency of time, greatest frequency of time of whatever part of the brain is being stimulated between basically year 1 and year 6. The frontal lobe's getting wired there. So when a mother is using an internet device as a pacifier and babysitter, because that's what they've become.
That's what my sister does.
Yeah, and I don't know if your sister's a single mom, but this is a big-time single mom epidemic.
She is now.
Okay, well, it's...
she wasn't when it started,
rough.
but, I mean, it was the same general behavior regarding raising her kids, slapping them in front of a television. For the longest time, my oldest nephew would have anxiety attacks, like full-on panic attacks, crying and could not be consoled if there was not a television on.
Yep.
Because from the moment he was born, he was in front of a television.
Yep.
And that was terrifying to me. I'm like, you've got to retrain this child. And of course, by then it's way too late because he's 8 years old or 9 years old. But they can be trained to that extent. So
it's not way too late at 8 or 9 years old.
Okay.
But it is difficult.
All right.
And it is stressful. And it is going to be hard on whoever the parent is. And it's hard on a kid. It's like weaning someone off drugs. So what happens is if a kid is on an internet device, most of the hours that the brain is, conscious.
Yeah.
The part of the internet, the part of the brain that's stimulated by the internet device is called the amygdala. So the amygdala is also the part that it likes sex, violence, cocaine. Some things I've read said heroin, but more so in men than women.
So it's like the dopamine center. I suppose.
Yeah. It's the pleasure. It's like hitting the pleasure center big time. So what happens is, if this young developing brain is the plurality of the time is on an internet device, the brain is being wired to the amygdala. The other thing that the amygdala does. So our frontal lobe is responsible for logic and reasoning. So if I ask you a question that you did not know the answer of because you haven't thought about it yet, your frontal lobe is going to engage your brain at some level. And and wherever your brain got wired to during your childhood is probably going to somewhat determine how you come up with this answer. And so when your brain is wired to your amygdala, and people my age couldn't even have this happen to them because, I turned 45 the other day. And so like there wasn't even high-speed internet or, these type of devices until I was, nearly 25 years old. My brain was basically done, developing at that point. So anyways, what happens is when the brain is wired to the amygdala is also the part of the brain that becomes stimulated by rage. So one of my theories is that, now this is a theory of mine, and I am not like a doctor. I'm just, quite literally a farmer that, listens to YouTube videos while I'm working and doing some research on this particular thing. My theory is that if the frontal lobe is wired to the amygdala and now the frontal lobe needs to engage in logic and reasoning, it now stimulates and turns on the rage part of the brain. And then I think the result is the summer of 2020 with all the cities being burnt and all the riots and all the college kids that are running around screaming, Black Lives Matter and, and I hate Trump and I don't even know why they hate Trump and, all this stuff. And I don't think that you could have had, the type of mindset of a lot of these, younger college people, woke people, let's call them. I don't really know what to even call them anymore. Algorithmic slaves is what I've been calling them.
I like that.
Their brain has been wired by the algorithm. They do what the algorithm tells them. They get their dopamine hit off the algorithm. Kind of like the guy that's, sleeping in a tent down in Manchester, shooting up heroin, Manchester, New Hampshire, shooting up heroin every day or every other day. That is, has an EBT card and, gets a welfare check from the state so he can, be, one of these guys who's going to vote for more welfare, more EBT card, and just going to keep on doing drugs. The system essentially has control over him indirectly, but sort of like the algorithm has control over these people whose the algorithm's been programming their brain since birth. If you go to Market Basket in Manchester, New Hampshire on the 5th of the month.
I can only imagine.
So you
I suspect that's when they get their EBT.
Correct. That's when they're recharged.
I'm good. I don't need it.
Well, I got some video. I walked around like 3 years ago in a Manchester, maybe it's 4 years ago, and I just couldn't believe how many like infants and toddlers, like little like not even year-old babies, got like a 11-inch iPad tablet thing, in their car, in their little stroller in front of them, and there's just some little bubbly animated character, and then it gets worse. And
to be clear, I'm okay with if your family needs EBT cards because you can't feed your 11-month-old or your 5-year-old otherwise. Like, I'm not going to get upset about that. But if
I'm going to get upset about that, but I'm also upset about all the money that's going to the big corporations because I think that's even worse than the amount of money going to welfare.
To be fair,
parents.
I'm not happy about it, but I have other things to be upset about first, like the money going to corporations and the $1 trillion war machine and other things that are costing me a whole lot more money than that family using their EBT card. But at the same time, they're destroying their children with these tablets.
And when you go to Market Basket on the 5th of the month and you watch these people who are clearly on welfare. And
not to mention the food they buy.
I was just going to talk about this. The food that they buy.
We have to dig into that because I grocery shop now.
Yep.
And I see what other people are buying. So
if anybody listening to me is a cashier at a grocery store, they know exactly what I'm talking about. One of my very good friends was not 100% sure, is a big cheese in a very large Northeast grocery store chain, mostly Massachusetts, Connecticut, Rhode Island. Anyways, and she confirmed what I'm about to say because they have all the metadata because they have cards that you swipe, and it just everybody's got these cards and they build up points, and you can even go in on an app and you can make a shopping cart for daughter number 1 and your son and your husband, and they can go on their app and so when mom goes shopping they can make sure everything's on the list.
That's why I hate these things. So by the way, when CVS or Target or Walmart or whatever ask you if you want to scan your card, first of all, don't ever even get the card. It's not going to really save you any money. They're just finding out exactly what you buy so that they can market to you.
You know what I say? I say, wow, could you imagine if Adolf Hitler had that technology?
Right.
He would know who's buying an extra loaf of bread to feed somebody extra in the house.
Yeah, I have to say I'm probably like one of the few people. I don't know if you guys are avoid payment card, credit cards, debit cards, and
I avoid all that stuff. Yep.
Not the checks, the coupons too. All that stuff and the rewards cards, but I've never used any of that stuff.
I avoid the rewards cards, but like debit cards and credit cards to an extent, I can't avoid it sometimes.
Well, I understand if you're ordering something online, or especially something you can't get somewhere else.
But they're terrible. Their algorithms are the worst I've ever seen. Like recently, I bought a weed whacker on Amazon because I needed one. I'm so sick of dealing with twine from weed whackers that I bought one with like the actual blade on it. Mm-hmm. And Amazon seemed like the best place to go about getting that. And now all I've been getting for the last week are advertisements for weed whackers.
And you already spent the money.
Yeah. I don't know what these people are thinking, but they know Amazon knows for a fact.
Because the product is designed to fail, and they know that. Therefore, if they advertise
if it fails,
they keep advertising that, you'll buy another one.
No, if it fails within the first 2 years, I'm sending it back to Amazon.
Yep.
If it fails a week from now, I'm sending it back. So why advertise it to me in 2 years, maybe?
Maybe because you're probably, when you go the second time, you're probably going to spend more money on a weed whacker, and they want you to buy.
You're making excuses for them. The answer is so much simpler. It's that their algorithms are idiots. They're retarded.
I don't know. I'm not gonna go there.
You avoid all these trackers anyway.
Yeah, I mean,
I'm steeped in these things.
This is true. Very true.
Like, I go to Amazon and I buy something, and then I immediately open up Facebook. Right? I know how insecure that is. I know how dangerous that is, and how it's just feeding Facebook and Amazon all sorts of information that, yes, I don't really care if they have, and it sometimes benefits me, but I'll immediately receive Facebook advertisements for weed whackers. And the only explanation for that is that they know that I looked up a weed whacker. And so they know I'm interested in weed whackers.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I don't know how accurate they are,
It's the worst advertising model in human history. It only advertises things to you that you're already interested in.
Yeah, they've already bought. In particular, I think is what you're trying to say.
I bought a Mazda Miata recently, and then for the next 3 weeks, all I got were ads for Mazda Miatas. I'm only going to buy one of these.
Now, it's probably also because they can't distinguish between what you have bought and what you haven't bought, or versus just looked at, right? So
right, but if I'm looking up Mazda Miatas, what is the point of advertising Mazda Miatas to me? I'm already interested in the vehicle.
This is why the algorithm needs access to the DMV database that shows that you already registered the Mazda Miata that you bought. And then the algorithm can advertise to you modifications and upgrades, maybe tires, brakes, paint jobs, something like that,
I could understand if Camaro or Mustang was advertising to me. They were like, oh, you looked for a Miata? Well, here, let's advertise a Camaro to you. I would understand that.
I think part of it though is that they're not quite as smart as you think. And,
that's exactly my point.
And the other thing is there's also another aspect to this too, potentially, in that they want you to buy the Mazda. What was it, Mazda or something like that?
Miata. Yeah, I struggled with it as well just now.
Yeah, they want you to buy that, so you've looked at it, but they don't know if you've bought it. So they're going to keep advertising it because you've looked at it and you might already be on the edge of buying that versus something else.
I don't think the algorithm quite so much really cares if you buy it. They just want you looking at the screen, and since you're interested in that Mazda Miata, for example, they're probably going to start pitching you things about it.
Fair enough.
Back to calories.
Yeah, sorry.
So I'm actually building a slideshow presentation. It's going to be about cheap calories versus not cheap calories. So
you mean cheap
food
for your body, health-wise, or cheap financially?
Like government subsidized food in a grocery store in the form of like zebra cakes, which is very inexpensive calories. Right? I mean, if you know what zebra cakes are.
Yeah, they're like 330 calories per, and it's like $2 for a box maybe. So
for like a box of a dozen, it's like $2.
But it's not filling.
No.
You'd have to eat like 5 or 6 of them to be filled.
But the welfare recipient that has 2 kids, and so that is at Market Basket on the 5th of the month in Manchester, New Hampshire, according to a woman I was with there that day, one day a few years ago, she's like, that girl's got like $100 eyelashes. That girl's got like a several $100 hairdo. That's like an $800 phone.
Those are work expenses.
That's like a several $100 purse, and she's using an EBT card. Like this woman was very upset. Like she got to witness this right in front of her, and it was soda. It was zebra cakes.
Always soda.
It was all the government subsidized crap. It was Doritos. It was boxes of cereal. All the stuff that makes you fat, diabetic, Alzheimer's. It was all
frozen
the processed
pizza,
food.
Frozen TV dinners.
Yeah, a whole bunch of frozen foods. There wasn't one fresh vegetable.
No, I know, right?
Not one.
When I go to the vegetable aisle, I'm the only one there.
Yep.
It's shocking. More about this coming up because, like, Americans, you got to stop eating this garbage, these frozen pizzas and these bag of chips. And it's more expensive, I promise you. If I shop for my house for a month and you shop for your house for a week, I'm going to come out ahead with more groceries and a lower bill because I'm not buying that prepackaged, all you have to do is microwave it crap. 603-283-6160. It's Free Talk Live.
This hour of Free Talk Live is brought to you by Dash Digital Cash. Dash is the cryptocurrency designed to be used for spending. Rising fees have made Bitcoin useless for purchases, but Dash continues to have fees less than 1 cent per transaction, and its features ensure Dash is undefeated as the most useful cryptocurrency in the marketplace. From a technical standpoint, Dash transactions are irreversible, and its network is protected from 51% attacks by their Chainlocks technology. There's no need to wait for a confirmation before considering a Dash transaction complete, so it's great for merchants. Dash is one of the oldest cryptocurrencies and is widely available on exchanges, including the decentralized Maya protocol, and in multi-crypto wallets. It's easy to get and use Dash. Start by learning more at dash.org. Big thanks to the Dash DAO for sending us 32 Dash per month to promote Dash on the air. Visit dash.org to learn about Dash. Dash.org.
From Feature Story News in Washington, I'm Nick Harper. US Vice President Kamala Harris has said Joe Biden's legacy of accomplishments is unmatched in modern history. She spoke at an event at the White House, her first public comments since Biden said he would not seek re-election. Harris did not mention her campaign to become her party's nominee. Instead, she praised Biden and his accomplishments during his 3.5 years in office.
Joe Biden's legacy of accomplishment over the past 3 years is unmatched in modern history. In one term, he has already, yes, you may clap. In one term, he has already surpassed the legacy of most presidents who have served 2 terms in office.
Meanwhile, former House Speaker Nancy Pelosi has endorsed Harris, writing in a statement that she did so with immense pride and limitless optimism for the country's future. She added that her enthusiastic support for Kamala Harris is official, personal, and political. Harris is rallying support as she tries to become the Democrats' nominee after President Biden dropped his re-election bid. Democrats, including Congressman Joaquin Castro, are rallying behind her.
I've been in different conversations already with folks in the Congressional Progressive Caucus, the Hispanic Caucus, and others who are ready to support the vice president. What I've seen among my colleagues so far is overwhelming support for Kamala Harris to be the new presidential nominee.
Meanwhile, President Joe Biden's doctor says his COVID-19 symptoms have almost resolved completely. Biden is scheduled to meet Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu in Washington on Tuesday. Biden remains, though, at his residence in Rehoboth Beach, Delaware, where he's been since last Wednesday. Netanyahu is also expected to meet Vice President Harris during his visit. The director of the U.S. Secret Service, Kimberly Cheatle, has been answering tough questions at a congressional hearing about security failings in the attempted assassination of Donald Trump on July the 13th. Cheatle has pledged to prevent anything like it from happening again, but many lawmakers appeared unconvinced, as FSN's Caroline Malone reports.
Hours and hours of tough questioning, and yet few revelations about why the Secret Service teams at the rally in Butler, Pennsylvania, were not able to stop the shooting before it happened. Secret Service Director Kimberly Cheatle says they have a distinction between suspicious activity and threatening, and the risk level was deemed okay for Trump to take the stage that day. She also talked of consultations between the Secret Service and Trump's campaign staff for 5 days before the event, in reference to questions about why the shooter was able to access a rooftop with a clear shot of the stage that was actually outside the security perimeter. There are now calls for Cheatle to stand down, and investigations into the whole incident continue. Caroline Malone, Washington.
From Bureaus Worldwide, this is FSN.
Yep, we still do email. Drop your email address in the entry box at freetalklive.com, and you'll be kept in the loop with Free Talk Live.
Talk Live. You can join us, 603-283-6160, if you would like to do that. Again, that number is 603-283-6160. With you in the studio tonight, it's Arya,
Jay, and Mr. Penguin.
And we're talking about food here, but I want to tell you about the Free Talk Live podcast. It's officially unofficial. We've been podcasting since podcasting began, but we've launched a new podcast anyway. It's about 30 to 45 minutes long per episode. It releases once per week. And you can find it at freetalkcast.com. It's brought to you by the same people who do Free Talk Live. It's just a new project for us, a new show, basically, that we've started to be a podcast designed to be a podcast from the beginning. So check it out at freetalkcast.com. Last week's episode was basically called Don't Be a Jerk. It was called something else, but we're on FCC radio right now, and on the podcast, we're not limited with what we can say, so it wasn't jerk, but it was called Don't Be a Jerk, and it was a lot of fun. I sat down with Nikki. We talked about the Donald Trump assassination and some other things. Tomorrow night, I'm sitting down with Bonnie to do episode 8 of the Free Talk Cast, so check that out, freetalkcast.com, and, subscribe to it there. It's got its own RSS feed. Of course, it's also available at SoundCloud and Spotify and all of the other places where you find the Free Talk Live show already. But it would help my understanding of the stats if you subscribe directly at freetalkcast.com. So please do that. Otherwise, just continue enjoying the content as it becomes available, because the radio show archive is not going anywhere. We're going to continue doing that as long as there's a radio show to do. But I want to talk about food, because we got into this subject a little bit. And this is a tricky thing for me, because I'm an animal rights activist, or maybe not activist, but advocate, because I don't really do any activism for animal rights. I had dabbled in the past with being a vegetarian, and I gave up on that because it was just too difficult for me to do for some reason. I went to prison, and in a very short time, I became a vegetarian again. And this is in part because I worked in the prison kitchen, and I saw the low grade of meat.
Grade D, but edible, institutional use only?
Yes.
Yep. Okay.
That was the kind of meat that you got in the Bureau of Prisons. And by working in the kitchen and being known to be a vegetarian, I was given free reign to make whatever vegetarian alternative I wanted. So I was able to experiment and explore. I got some really good cookbooks that I was able to use. I ended up making jerk tofu at one point, lentil pastries, and some other incredible dishes that have probably never been served to inmates in BOP history. Jerk tofu, probably not on the menu in any other institution managed by the BOP. But it was good, and I learned how to adapt to a vegetarian diet using a lot of beans and tofu and other sources of protein instead of eating meat. When I got out of prison, I continued doing that. I continued grocery shopping, and now, for the most part, unless I'm at work, I prefer to cook my own food. I do eat eggs, and that's my main source of protein. I eat an omelet every single day with freshly chopped onions and tomatoes and jalapenos and other wonderful stuff in it. And I go grocery shopping now, usually every Monday or Tuesday, and it's appalling to me what I see. Some of these people rack up $300, $400 grocery bills. It's usually an older couple, 50, 60 years old, and they got a grocery cart, and it's full of just garbage. 5 or 6 bags of Doritos.
And they wonder why they're taking a fistful of medication every day. Diabetes and Alzheimer's and all this stuff. Oh, it's insane. And it's all because of the food.
But that one bag of Doritos is going to run them like $6 or $7. I can get an entire meal's worth of stuff for $6 or $7, because if I'm going to buy some fruits and vegetables to use in a salad, then it's going to last me enough time where it's going to average $6 or $7 per meal.
Do you not eat any snacks, or you're just
I glazed some carrots earlier and ate those as a snack.
Okay, so that's not
I took some
what
carrots,
I meant by snack, but okay.
I peeled them and I sliced them and I put them in some water with a little bit of butter and some brown sugar.
So you've got a really healthy diet then.
I guess so. I mean, I don't know how much sugar, butter, and carrots would be considered healthy.
It depends on the sugar and the butter.
Well, it was brown sugar, and it was actual, real, well, I don't know if it was
grass-fed butter
or not,
would be the ideal.
Yeah, that would be ideal. I love
butter from grass-fed cows.
Beef. And back in the day when I ate beef, grass-fed beef, I didn't think there would be a difference the first time I
didn't even know that was a thing.
It's very much a thing. And I thought it would just be like normal beef, but one day I got the grass-fed burger from Local Burger, and I was stunned by how delicious it was. The difference is actually noticeable between grass-fed and what is the other one? Corn-fed?
Right.
Corn-fed? Yeah. Definitely go with grass-fed. You know way more about this than I do, though. So
a quick thing: grass-fed versus corn-fed with cows. So there's fatty acids, omega 3, 6, and 9.
Okay.
So I might screw this up a little bit. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe the omega 3 fatty acids are the ones that we that are very, very beneficial for us. I believe the omega 6 fatty acids are kind of neutral. They're not super beneficial. They don't really hurt us too much. And the omega 9 fatty acids are the ones that we want to stay away from. They have a negative, result when we consume them.
I know omega 3s are generally good. I don't know about the status of the other two.
So what I understand about butter and meat and tallow from grass-fed cows versus corn-fed cows. Now we've got to understand. The corn-fed cows are generally being fed corn in a feedlot. It's usually a big commercial factory farm operation because the corn is extremely government subsidized. There's huge crop subsidies on corn, so you can actually, as a big corporate farm operation or a feedlot, you can quite literally buy corn cheaper than it cost to make the corn. Not all the time, but most of the time. Same thing with canola, soybean, Cottonseed is used in big corporate beef. All these things. So canola, corn, soybean are like the biggest inputs in like the big feed outfits and operation. And then you got alfalfa. The cows really need to have some kind of grass, or they get in really bad shape.
Okay.
So and then now we have Roundup Ready alfalfa, which is something sort of new. So all of these ingredients that are being fed to your beef that's going to McDonald's and there's the regular commercial stuff at Walmart or whatever are being finished and are being raised on feedlots generally that are doing all the government subsidized grains, and all these government subsidized grains are genetically modified. They're Roundup Ready. This would be your corn, soy, cotton, and so it has tremendous amounts of glyphosate, which is the chemical in Roundup that kills weeds.
And Monsanto, by the way, is the company responsible for a lot of this, and they are the devil.
Oh, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
They have sued individual farmers through the Midwest because some of their soybean seeds were found on their property because the wind had carried them over.
Yeah, this is like
cross-pollination.
Even if you don't care at all about your food, like that right there should concern you.
Yeah, that's horrifically evil.
I mean,
and
somebody
Monsanto
else
wins the lawsuits when they do this.
And somebody else tells you what you can grow and how you can grow it, and if you can grow it.
Yeah,
that's and through no fault of your own.
So the example I like to use is so this house right here is about 20 feet from the house next door.
Right.
So the guy next door, let's say this house we're in right now is yellow, and the guy next door is going to paint his house purple. And he paints his house purple, and a whole bunch of overspray, yellow speckles and drops and overspray, purple paint comes over here and paints and gets all over the yellow house. So what Monsanto is doing to the farmer that gets a little bit of their genetics in the corn is they're suing them. So so the neighbor who paints his house purple and oversprays and speckles your house in purple paint then sues you for painting your house that you never asked him to paint, and you might think he damaged your house. Like if it was your car and your neighbor is out there spraying paint all over his car and it gets all over your car.
Well, if you're selling GMO-free products and you're advertising that, then he is damaging your products. Without a doubt.
So this happened in the 80s, and and like one of the judges that was involved with this, Clarence Thomas, was a judge on a Supreme Court. Maybe this was the late 80s or the 90s. I don't remember the exact time, but there's a whole bunch of periods where the Supreme Court has heard basically Monsanto versus this farm family, and Monsanto destroys them, essentially.
I mean, Monsanto's got billions. Of course they do.
And
that's why they should all be like guillotined.
Right. Yes. Well, it comes down to government farm subsidies. So the only way you get a crop subsidy in the United States for your crop is to use Monsanto growing practices, which means you have to use Monsanto herbicides, certified fertilizers, and all the fertilizer they're using is synthetic fertilizer. And this is how we get a Mississippi Delta dead zone. It could not have so you're familiar with that part of the country. You're from down there.
I'm familiar with seeing corn grown in places every single year and just watching it die year after year after year. And the same people plant the same corn over and over, and it never produces any crop, and they get paid to do it.
And well, I worked on a big farm operation. 3,000 acres is what we worked out in Colorado. We service a dairy. I refer to it as an udder pus factory. We would do a bunch of custom corn chopping for them, and they had 6,000 cows they were milking. We put up like 200,000 tons of corn silage. It all got sprayed with the minimum amount of Roundup and all kinds of other pesticides and things that was required to check off on these boxes to get all the crop subsidies. And the Roundup's not really working anymore because
of
everything's
natural selection
becoming resistant to it. So then they start dumping way more Roundup on this stuff, and they're like, oh, we're getting overrun by all these grasshoppers and all these bugs because there's no more snakes and frogs and lizards anywhere in our fields because the glyphosate kills them. This is Agent Orange is what basically this stuff is. That Roundup is. It came out of Agent Orange.
Monsanto was the company that developed Agent Orange.
Right, and then they developed
which was dropped on villages.
That
in,
is
I think,
really
Vietnam.
interesting aspect that I did not know before.
Yeah, so what they did
is crazy.
There was a pit, and it was allegedly in Springfield, Massachusetts, about 60 miles straight south of here. It's a big, it's called, I can't remember, but Monsanto is what it was. It's all badged differently now, all the signs, and some other company, Solyndra or something it's called. No, that's not what it is. But anyways, there was a pit where they dumped all this Agent Orange from Korea War, Vietnam War era. And Agent Orange, what they did is they just dropped it they aerosoled it above the tree canopy in Vietnam, for example.
Yeah.
And then 2 days later, you could see everything on the ground because all the trees died and all the big leaves, wilted and they were all yellow. And then you drop a little bit of napalm or throw a couple, fire grenades or something out, and it sets the entire forest on fire because it's all now a tinderbox because it's all dry yellow leaves and stuff. So they destroy all these villages, and what this
stuff does to human beings who get it on them.
Cancers, all kinds of crazy stuff, hormone dysfunction. Atrazine's another chemical. That's the one that Alex Jones was talking about when he says it makes the frogs gay. And atrazine is a chemical that results in hermaphrodite frogs. And
we know also that we're making the fish trans by dumping like birth control and other hormones into the sewage system that ultimately ends up in lakes and rivers and oceans.
And atrazine,
it's a scientific fact that fish are turning trans because of the estrogen that is being dumped via birth control into the sewage system.
And this atrazine I'm telling you about is a similar phytoestrogen something or another. And what that does is these guys have dry land where there's no irrigation, like in Nebraska, Colorado, all over the Midwest, high desert areas. And you spray atrazine, which is really, really cheap to spray on the ground. It's very inexpensive. It's heavily government subsidized, and nothing grows for 2 years. And the reason they don't want anything growing for 2 years in that land is because whatever moisture falls, they want it to stay there. They don't want some plant sucking up any potential moisture in the ground because they want to come in 2 years and plant another crop of wheat or a crop of corn or something like this.
Wouldn't it be more beneficial to rotate your crop and plant something else that would restore the soil? I mean, I don't know much about this, to be fair.
So because this is dry land where it only gets like 2 inches of rain a year.
Okay.
It's basically desert. There's nothing out there. Every other year they plant some kind of crop on it. It's usually wheat. Another thing that they do with wheat, which is this is really bad. So all your bread products that have gluten in them is most of your big commercial wheat operations spray Roundup on the wheat 2 weeks before they harvest it. And the wheat is not genetically modified, but what they want to do is they want to dry the field. So the Roundup is a decescitant, I think is how you say it. And it dries the field by killing everything in the field. So when the combine comes in and harvests the wheat, the grain reaper, it is way more efficient. You'll get like 30% more wheat inside the combine.
Because it's harvesting dead wheat.
Dead, dry grasses. And if you take like grass that's dry and long and it's been sitting out there for a week, like hay, and it breaks apart in your hand.
Yeah.
Versus grass that you just cut it right now, it's like really hard to break apart. It's fibrous.
Right, it's still got all of its moisture in it.
Right, and that gums up the machine. That makes the machine not as efficient, and also it kills any weeds in there. There's a binder weed that's a real problem. It's like really hard to deal with. It's like very strong, and it jams up these combines. So they don't want that binder weed. They don't want any of the volunteer wheat from the seeds that have fallen off and then they germinated.
The tragedy of this really is that we don't need that level of efficiency.
Nope.
We throw out bread and dough and crap all the time.
I get phone. I used to feed some bread to my animals. I don't really do it anymore. I feed them a little bit of bread to like the ducks and stuff and some of the younger chickens because they like it and they eat it up. But I get calls every couple of weeks. You want 5 tons of bread? Nope.
Yeah, I believe it.
And sometimes. A couple years ago, we were getting a bunch of bread. We had a little bit of a grain shortage, so we switched over to bread, and the bread wasn't even expired yet. That they were throwing out because
but they just had received a new shipment, so didn't have room for it, presumably.
So what the kid told me that we were getting the bread from, he goes, "Yeah, we don't have the manpower to like look through the bread. We just take all the bread and just throw it in these totes that they pick up with a forklift, and they would dump it in my dump truck." And they're like, and I'm like, so I'm looking at the bread. I'm like, this doesn't expire for 2 weeks. Yep, we got new bread that came in, and we don't look through it anymore. We just throw it all out. And
that's crazy.
Yep.
Meanwhile, these industrial farms are operating like they can't afford to not have this 30% increased efficiency by spraying Roundup 2 weeks before harvest time.
Well,
that's efficiency. It sounds like they could afford to lose.
If you go talk to some drylander farmer that's got 80,000 acres of dry land, and there's a guy in eastern Colorado we did some sort of custom work for. That's what they did. Kalsovic family, a huge outfit. They own 80,000 acres. I think they work about 100,000 in total, and they farm it every other year because you can't grow every single year. Sometimes you got to take 2 years off. You've got to grow every third year if it doesn't rain at all. and they're all spraying all these chemicals everywhere, the atrazine, all this stuff.
Would it make more sense to have the farm where there's moist land, though?
It would. But these guys are so hardcore government subsidized. This is why if
there's plenty of land in the United States. If the government didn't control everything, then they should be able to just chop down a few acres of trees and have a farm there.
Well, it all comes down to subsidies. Whatever they subsidize, there's more of.
Yeah.
So like we were talking a little while ago in the other segment, we were getting into about how the welfare mom that's single probably, or not with the dad on paper, so she can collect the welfare. Right. Where was I going with this? So like you guys said, you're not mad at the welfare mom for using the EBT card, and you're more upset about that welfare dollars going to corporate welfare, like corporate farms.
Well, yeah, because
Raytheon.
it's so substantially greater than the couple dollars that are being handed out for votes.
But here's a problem I have with that welfare mom getting welfare. Health and Human Services is creating an epidemic of poverty in America because they are subsidizing poor people. And when you subsidize poor people, just like when you subsidize sugar, you're going to have a lot more poor people out there if you keep on subsidizing. Just like you start just like with the subsidization of single moms. If you look at as soon as single moms started getting subsidized, which was basically shortly after World War II, they started with these subsidies for single moms. The rate of single moms has skyrocketed. Now, the U.S. is really one of the only countries in the world that subsidize single mothers the way they do. And the United States has 23% of the children in the United States are being raised by a single parent, and 92% of those single parents are single moms. And there's actually a couple percent is somebody else that's not even a dad. It's something like
a grandmother or something.
Right, grandmother, aunt, and something like 1.8% is single dads, raising the kids, or 3% depending on where you go. And the world average is 3.5.
I talked about this briefly when NBC interviewed me for the Crypto 6, the Live Free or Die thing that they did. I don't remember now in the pursuit of Live Free or Die or something is what the documentary was called. They ended up interviewing me, and I pointed out that when I was in college, my wife and we only had one car. I worked a full-time job, and I was a full-time student. We didn't have any extra money. So I applied for EBT card, or food stamps, as one would call them in the South, and I was denied. And the reason we were denied was because I was told that if we wanted to get approved, I would have to drop out of college. And it was because I was going to college that I could not be approved to get food stamps. And I don't know how clearer they could make it that if you're trying to better your life, then you don't qualify for these things. But if you're content to just live the rest of your life on food stamps, then they'll gladly give them to you.
So the welfare system is not about supporting and building better culture. It's about degenerating the culture that exists and the further and then the next generations that come along. I actually just had a phone call with somebody the other day I grew up with, same age as me, and and she's got grandkids. And this girl was on disability at 20 years old when we were kids. And she
was it earned, legitimate disability? Okay.
No. It was one of these.
There are a lot of people I know who are like that. Maybe not a lot, but one is too many, and three is way too many.
So they're these social worker, lawyer, advocate firms that all they do is get you on disability. That is the entire goal of this building in Springfield, Massachusetts, full of people in suits and ties, stealing from everybody with paper and pen, is to get everybody that they can on Social Security. And when you get when this girl got on Social Security at 20 years old, she was a back injury from doing stupid stuff on a horse. She did get hurt, but it ain't like she was at work or something. Literally never worked a job in her life, and her injury wasn't that bad because she had no problem going and riding her horses and stacking hay and this, that, or the other.
She just didn't want to work.
But the example was her parents got on disability, some aunts, some other people, and they had this lawyer that was just getting them all on disability. And so the lawyer sues, I don't know if it was the state of Massachusetts or the Treasury Department or Social Security or whoever, but the lawyer does all this stuff. And then what happens is when they win like the judgment that you have to like give these people Social Security, the lawyer gets a massive chunk of it. Because I remember when this girl finally, like, she got denied multiple times, and
probably rightfully,
and yes, absolutely, and she also did have some kids that like she wasn't really sure who the dad was, and a
series of good decisions. It sounds like
right. So anyways, fast forward, like her kids, got right on the dole. They got all vaccinated. They got all. All the stuff. Oh, back up a little bit. When the lawyer won her disability claim, I guess that you would call it, there was multiple thousands of dollars in like that you're going to get from the time that you got disabled. So,
back pay.
So the lawyer is like, I can remember there was a thing like, you're only 21 or 20, so we can only go back to like you're 18. If someone's like, older, we can go back to your 18 and get more years. I don't know how many years to go back, but she was like, I got $18,000 or $12,000, and the lawyer got, I don't know, something like that, $10,000 or $12,000, and the lawyer's just pumping these things out like every week, multiple of these cases, and it's just filing the same boilerplate paperwork, just changing the names on it, and they're making $10,000, $12,000, $50,000 off these disability claim settlement kind of things. And then the kids are on disability, and what happens, not all these people, but most of the people who are getting on disability in some kind of pain management program because their back hurts a little bit and it's just a lot easier to just take a pill, they become the heroin addicts. This girl become a heroin addict. Got into I don't know what else she got into too. I don't know, but she definitely was like full-blown heroin addict. I guess she's sober now, but like there's kids and there's grandkids, and the grandkids are, all essentially, some kind of state entity is Health and Human Services is paying because like the whole like generation of a lot of the like welfare recipient class, and they keep on passing this down to their kids is degrading and degrading and degrading. And so
they don't know anything else.
Right. They don't know anything else. And Health and Human Services, they want to create this dependent class, and whether the single mom that's a drug addict that's raising a couple of kids and claiming all the benefits, or it's a guy living in a tent pooping in the street that's using opiates, or it's me or you who work hard, our vote all counts the same, and those guys are going to vote for more benefits. And I believe that's a lot of the intentional setup with destroying American culture and destroying, this nation.
This is sort of why I support Vermin Supreme. Once a system gets to this point, all you can really do is throw a bomb at it.
I hung out with Vermin Supreme this weekend.
He's an awesome person. Vermin Supreme for president all the way, because make Vermin Supreme president. Let him be the bomb that we throw at the system. I don't know what else to do at this point. 603-283-6160. Biden has dropped out. We're going to talk some more about that and just about life in general. It's Free Talk Live.
A prison rights group protests the treatment of supervillains in the nation's magnetic detainment cubes. A local dad thought he could make it out of a zoo without buying his kids light-up shit, and a pigeon wishes just once it could complete a head movement smoothly. This is the Onion Week in Review. Millions of frustrated Americans across the country asked this week why the nation's struggling mental health system couldn't just get it together and stop feeling sorry for itself. Exasperated citizens told reporters that they had lost all patience with the ailing network's failure to perform basic tasks, such as routine mental health evaluations and emergency counseling.
Look, I get it. Everyone goes through a rough patch. Just look at the education system. I know times are tough, but things are never going to improve unless the system decides it wants to get better.
In other news, a new study finds that more men are opting to be in the room when their wife conceives their baby. An area man is unaware all of his friends think of him when they want to put things into perspective, and 36 chemical and emotional responses are activated by the phrase pigs in a blanket.
This is the Onion News Network.
My name is Jacob Hornberger. I'm president of the Future of Freedom Foundation, which Congressman Ron Paul awarded for having an outstanding freedom website. Write us at fff@fff.org, and we'll send you a free 3-month subscription to our monthly journal of libertarian essays and our booklet, Economic Liberty in the Constitution, which George Mason University economics professor Walter Williams praised in a recent column. That's fff@fff.org.
What if you want to hear the latest episode of Free Talk Live, but all you have is your phone, you forgot to download our archive, and you have no data connection? You can call our Listen line at 641-793-0191. That's a long-distance number, so you may incur charges. If not, listen as long as you want. 641-793-0191. The Free Talk Live Listen line, 641-793-0191.
You're listening to the live edition of Free Talk Live. Hour number 2 is next, after the news, here on the Liberty Radio Network at LRN.FM.
From Feature Story News in Washington, I'm Nick Harper. US Vice President Kamala Harris has said Joe Biden's legacy of accomplishments is unmatched in modern history. She spoke at an event at the White House, her first public comments since Biden said he would not seek re-election. Harris did not mention her campaign to become her party's nominee. Instead, she praised Biden and his accomplishments during his 3.5 years in office.
Joe Biden's legacy of accomplishment over the past 3 years is unmatched in modern history. In one term, he has already, yes, you may clap. In one term, he has already surpassed the legacy of most presidents who have served 2 terms in office. His honesty, his integrity, his commitment to his faith and his family, his big heart, and his love, deep love of our country. And I am firsthand witness that every day our President Joe Biden fights for the American people, and we are deeply, deeply grateful for his service to our nation.
Meanwhile, former House Speaker Nancy Pelosi has endorsed Harris, writing in a statement that she did so with immense pride and limitless optimism for the country's future. She added that her enthusiastic support for Kamala Harris is official, personal, and political. Harris is rallying support as she tries to become the Democrats' nominee after President Biden dropped his re-election bid. Democrats, including Congressman Joaquin Castro, are rallying behind her.
I've been in different conversations already with folks in the Congressional Progressive Caucus, the Hispanic Caucus, and others who are ready to support the vice president. What I've seen among my colleagues so far is overwhelming support for Kamala Harris to be the new presidential nominee.
Meanwhile, President Joe Biden's doctor says his COVID-19 symptoms have almost resolved completely. Biden is scheduled to meet Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu in Washington on Tuesday. Biden remains, though, at his residence in Rehoboth Beach, Delaware, where he's been since last Wednesday. Netanyahu is also expected to meet Vice President Harris during his visit. The director of the U.S. Secret Service, Kimberly Cheatle, has been answering tough questions at a congressional hearing about security failings in the attempted assassination of Donald Trump on July the 13th. Cheatle has pledged to prevent anything like it from happening again, but many lawmakers appeared unconvinced, as FSN's Caroline Malone reports.
Hours and hours of tough questioning, and yet few revelations about why the Secret Service teams at the rally in Butler, Pennsylvania, were not able to stop the shooting before it happened. Secret Service Director Kimberly Cheatle says they have a distinction between suspicious activity and threatening, and the risk level was deemed okay for Trump to take the stage that day. She also talked of consultations between the Secret Service and Trump's campaign staff for 5 days before the event, in reference to questions about why the shooter was able to access a rooftop with a clear shot of the stage that was actually outside the security perimeter. There are now calls for Cheatle to stand down, and investigations into the whole incident continue. Caroline Malone, Washington.
From Bureaus Worldwide, this is FSN. In that hearing, House Oversight Committee Chairman James Comer accused the agency and Cheatle of failing to protect the former president and the rally-goers in Pennsylvania.
It is my firm belief, Director Cheatle, that you should resign. However, in complete defiance, Director Cheatle has maintained she will not tender her resignation. Therefore, she will answer questions today from members of this committee seeking to provide clarity to the American people about how these events were allowed to transpire. A former president and current candidate for president was shot in the head by a sniper within 500 feet of the podium. This is unacceptable, and we are concerned the Secret Service lacks the proper management to keep protectees safe from bad actors.
Hundreds of migrants from Central and South America are making their way to the US southern border by foot, hoping to reach the US before November's elections. Everson's Tony Waterman has more from Austin, Texas.
The caravan left from Mexico's southern border on Sunday, and according to the Associated Press, some of the migrants say they are hoping to reach U.S. soil before the November election. They are afraid that if Donald Trump reclaims the White House, he'll completely shut down the border to asylum seekers. Right now, migrants must use an app to get an appointment at border crossings. Besides closing the border, the former president has also pledged mass deportations of migrants who are already in the U.S. Tony Waterman, Texas.
There's more from us on X at Feature Story. That's Feature Story News. Nick Harper reporting.
This is the Onion Week in Review, pushed to the breaking point after constantly being taken to task without ever hearing a word of thanks for what it does around here. An overwhelmed and infuriated nation announced Wednesday that it was trying, okay? Jesus Christ. A poll of the American populace revealed that 33% felt they were doing pretty damn well, all things considered, while another 28% just wanted 2 measly minutes without somebody breathing down their damn neck. A group of female friends spent a raucous night on the town Thursday, validating the living shit out of each other.
You're the most talented person I know.
Eyewitness reports say the women absolutely went to town on a session of non-judgmental reassurances.
Last night was crazy. I don't even remember half the uplifting things I said to Karen. We've always been the kind of group that listens hard and consoles even harder.
And in other news, a group of semester at sea students steal an anchor for their dorm room. A 5-year-old wants to be an overworked Haitian nanny when he grows up, and every group of friends at a karaoke bar ruins every other group's night.
This is the Onion News Network.
Got Telegram? You can follow our channel there and discuss show prep with other listeners at telegram.freetalklive.com.
Free Talk Live.
Free Talk Live, and you can join us 603-283-6160 if you would like to join the discussion, talk about whatever we've been discussing, or talk about whatever is important to you. Again, the number 603-283-6160. Free Talk Live, of course, is brought to you by Dash, which is short for digital cash. It's the cryptocurrency made for spending. You can pay your bills with Dash at spritz.finance. Plus, they can send dollars to your bank if you still need those for something. Thanks to the Dash DAO for sending us 32 Dash per month for this sponsorship. It is easy to get and easy to use Dash. You can learn more at dash.org. Again, that's dash.org. It's a crazy time, I've noticed, in American politics, where the Donald Trump has been described, I saw by CNBC, I believe it was, described it as narrowly surviving an assassination attempt. And I get it. It's probably quite harrowing to be shot at and to be a presidential candidate who has been shot at. But I don't know how narrowly he survived an assassination attempt. He was recently shot at, it would seem, by someone. And the glass breaking...
I think there was 2 shooters.
Oh, yeah?
I just listened to a thing about, they're like, oh, there's evidence. There's a second shooter. There's this audio evidence, and then they use some surveillance stuff, and there was a guy in a water tower, and then the metadata from his phone says he's an FBI agent. I should see if I can find this. So you guys are probably...
Sounds good. Yeah, because I don't know much about it beyond someone tried to shoot Donald Trump, and apparently they had to do it from pretty far away because they did it from outside of the Secret Service's perimeter. And that was one of the reasons they were able to do it. And I know there's all sorts of conspiracy theories already going on about it. My initial assumption was that, well, if this wasn't legitimate, then Donald Trump himself probably hired the guy to do it. Because Donald Trump is the kind of egotistical person. I mean, this is going to help his campaign. There's no doubt about it. All of the people who were on the fence and who were leaning toward not supporting Donald Trump again, they are now 100% Donald Trump. Oh, the deep state's trying to kill him or whatever. Another hypothesis that I've entertained is that Joe Biden tried to have him assassinated. And I wouldn't be terribly surprised by this. Biden knew he had no chance of beating Donald Trump unless he killed him. I don't know how true that is. Obviously, that's just something I'm throwing out there. I would not be surprised at all to find that Joe Biden used his resources in the government to try to have Donald Trump assassinated.
Or instead of Joe Biden, just say the police state. I'm the deep state, not deep state, police state. It's all the same thing, because Joe Biden. One theory that I float around a lot is he could very well just be a victim of this elder abuse.
It does
he
seem
doesn't
that
even know
way.
what's going on. It sounds like, and he's just one of these. He's an old pedophile. Has got so much dirt on him. And so many skeletons in the closet, and a lot of his friends and family, would, if there was real justice, would rot in prison or be sent to the electric chair or something.
Yeah, anyone who loved him should have pulled him aside by now and said, "Look, man, it's time to just retire, live out the rest of your days surrounded by friends and family, and live in peace."
And so it's like he don't even know what's going on. He's just from the deep state, he's the best guy to have in because everybody else is running it from behind the scenes. And the way I've always looked at the presidential administration, I looked at it as like a school bus. And the president is not in the driver's seat. Yeah, he may not be sitting in the back, but he's not in the driver's seat. He's not in control of what's going on. And I don't think any of these guys have. I don't think anybody who gets so-called elected to office can actually fix real things like get rid of the Federal Reserve. Totally neuter this entire government.
Well, it should be obvious to Americans that this is the case. After all, we just dealt with Anthony Fauci being temporarily the most powerful person in the United States. Whatever agency he's in charge of, they put a moratorium on people being evicted from their properties for not paying rent. That's an insane amount of power. And Anthony Fauci, of course, was never elected to any office. He was appointed there. He is a lifelong bureaucrat, been in power for 20, 25, 30 years. And it didn't matter whether it was President Clinton or George W. Bush, Donald Trump, Barack Obama, or Joe Biden. Anthony Fauci was behind them as the head of whatever department that was the entire time. And that's the case with the Department of Education, Homeland Security, the military generals, the CIA. They may change around every once in a while, like the person who's currently the CIA head ends up going to the NSA or something like that. But Betsy DeVos being appointed to head the Department of Education, which, by the way, changed absolutely nothing within the United States. But that was considered a big deal at the time because he's appointing a new head. He's changing things. He's shaking things up. But, of course, nothing actually changed. And she had no real power to do anything anyway because she's got 50,000 bureaucrats underneath her who can't be replaced either and who have been in the place for decades who are really running the country. It's just this massive administrative state of one federal agency against another federal agency, and there's more than 400 of these things, none of them elected, all of them appointed, and some of them beyond removal from office thanks to the Pendleton Act that was passed in the 19th century.
And back to Fauci, like all this stuff that just came out about Fauci, I mean, the things with COVID and the scamdemic and, all of his investment in the profits he made off of Remdesivir, which is a drug that killed or seriously damaged 54% of the people in the trials. They were pushing that. The whole idea of, attacking ivermectin and hydrochloroquine and attacking like just being healthy and exercising and getting fresh air so they could push a vaccine. Well, he did all this stuff in the early 80s and in the 80s with AIDS. This guy's a monster. He like all this stuff that they're talking about him doing recently. Like he did it all with the HIV virus, which according to Dr. Judy Mikovits, HIV came from basically the the hepatitis B vaccine due to using mouse pieces, Mises pieces as Ernie Hancock puts it. If you go to freedomsphoenix.com and look up and just type in Dr. Judy, there's all kinds of interviews of Ernie doing all these interviews with Dr. Judy in 17, 18, and 19. And in 2017, she started writing a book called Plague of Corruption. And it was all about using XMR proteins, which were harvested from the lungs of a mouse to make this vaccine. They're retroviruses is what they're called. and to make these vaccines such as hepatitis B, and she says that's where the AIDS epidemic, the HIV all came from, is the hepatitis V, and she also says it was purposely put into a whole bunch of blood, purposely given to gay people. This was a big thing in the 80s, and Fauci was in all of this, profited huge off all of this. And there was a whole, so the Fauci's been a swamp monster for a very, very long time. He's an evil man. And there are still people that I had actually mentioned days ago to somebody that Fauci, should go to the electric chair. And
yeah, absolutely. And for no other reason than the sandfly testing on the beagles.
Sure, absolutely. I agree.
If for that reason alone, he should be fried in the electric chair.
And this individual was like, no, Fauci deserves a Medal of Honor for his work. And I'm like, and this individual is, a young, algorithmically trained, woke girl. Yeah. And she's just like, Fauci's wonderful. And I'm like, oh, man. And I was actually wearing a shirt that had Bill Gates on it with the hypodermic needle. It said, say no to the prick.
It's terrifying to me. And I don't think that Bill Gates is necessarily as evil as a lot of people believe him to be. I don't know whether he is or isn't, to be fair. But it concerns me when billionaires who are buying up large amounts of farmland and who constantly talk about the importance of depopulation then turn around and say, even though we think that we should have, a significantly lower population, we think it's important for you to take this thing for you to stay alive. That to me raises alarms because he's saying one thing, even if he genuinely believes that this vaccine was going to save lives, that's counter to what he has been saying for his entire life.
Bill Gates is a huge financial backer of Monsanto, by the way.
I'm not at all surprised to hear that.
That doesn't surprise me either.
And how did he make all of his money? He created a software, Microsoft.
Yeah.
And then, from what I understand, and this could be just my speculation,
I believe
a
lot of that code was stolen as well, if I recall correctly.
Right, yep. There's a whole bunch of stuff
they
about
bought
that.
It was bought.
Okay.
And then somehow there's all these viruses got created, so then you get to sell all kinds of virus software. So I'm sure the Microsoft guys created all these viruses to go after Microsoft so they can now upsell you something and keep on with all these updates. And I'm sure there are viruses they had nothing to do with, but it's pretty profitable if you're like you have the keys, let's say, and all the back doors to this Microsoft software to slip in some viruses where there's vulnerable things, and where the patch is, and then you sell everybody a $19 program times millions of people, hundreds of millions of people maybe, or even $3.99 virus software program to clear this stuff up. And he basically, as far in the way the COVID looks like, it did the same exact thing with humans. They just took the scam from the computers to the humans.
I wasn't around for this era of IT, but my coworker at the time, the contractor that provided me with a lot of subcontracts, I guess would be a better way of characterizing it. I asked him at one point, why doesn't Microsoft make an antivirus? Because it seems like they would be best suited to do this. And they made some crap like Windows Defender that was just useless for keeping viruses off of one's computer. And the way he explained it was they had at one point, but there was something done in regard to antitrust, and Congress or someone ended up prohibiting them from making additional antivirus software.
I think backing up a moment here, I think Microsoft or Bill Gates they basically enable the problem by not fixing the holes, which is why viruses exist. Basically, it's because
there's
of
always going
the
to be a hole. And you know this as well.
Yeah, but security updates should fix the hole. I mean, I always like to describe it like ants coming through a fence where you have a hammer and you're trying. Antivirus software is like trying to kill the ants. You're never going to kill all the ants coming through the hole. You got to patch the fence.
The worst thing about doing IT for me was when a client got a virus, they never failed to ask, well, I have an antivirus. How did this happen? As though using a condom meant that they could just do whatever they wanted and they wouldn't be at risk. Like they could just go to newpornsite.com and download this plugin and somehow this antivirus is going to magically keep them safe. And it's crazy how many people behave exactly that way. And they do the same thing with health, where I knew a man who was a diabetic, supremely overweight, ate Burger King every single day. And he was frustrated because he thought that his doctor should be able to just give him a magic pill to make his diabetes go away. And the doctor said, no, you're going to have to stop eating, these 3 sausage and biscuits from Burger King every day, or you're going to die. The man did ultimately die. Interestingly, he's the only person I know who died of COVID-19. And that's the thing for which I feel we should get an apology at some point, right? This COVID-19 and the reaction to the, quote, pandemic, it ruined people's lives.
Yeah, and when McDonald's killed them, not COVID-19.
Yeah, definitely. McDonald's killed. Well, it may have been COVID-19 that killed him acutely, but it was because of all of the underlying health issues that were caused by decades of eating Burger King and McDonald's. So yeah, maybe if you're 200 pounds overweight and your diet consists of sausage and biscuits from Burger King and you get COVID-19, it's going to kill you. But so will pneumonia or the flu if that's how you're taking care of yourself and you're 65 years old or however old this person was at the time. Like that's the age and the health conditions that one dies from pneumonia and the flu anyway. So any flu or pneumonia could kill him at that point. But it ruined people's lives, COVID-19. Music shows were canceled. Hollywood shut down for like a year and a half. There were no movies to go and see. And I realize those are petty complaints, but elderly people died alone in hospital beds, not being allowed to see their family members.
The one thing that changed is the population demographics. You have a certain generation, the baby boomers, who've gotten older, and now there's a larger vulnerable population out there.
Well, and I guess, but that was always going to be the case.
And a lot of that generation, the boomer generation, they are eating all of the garbage seed oils. Where these seed oils came in, your hydrogenated oils are sticky proteins that it takes your body 3 years to eliminate these. So when you eat like French fries and it's cooked in canola oil, and canola is toxic all by itself to humans.
Oh no, I actually use a fair bit of canola oil because olive oil is too potent of a flavor. What would you suggest it? Because I make my own salad dressings and I usually use some combination of vinegar, olive oil, and canola oil. I use canola oil sort of just to spread it out and help it spread better on things. Because some sort of oil is necessary, and olive oil itself, especially like extra virgin olive oil, is a very powerful flavor that just takes over everything else. So what would you recommend?
I would really like to ask my wife that question. She makes like these really good salad dressing type things, but a lot of them are olive oil based. She likes to use like Bragg's apple cider vinegar.
I use a lot of vinegar
and then there's like another. It's like a fermented soy type Bragg's amino acids maybe.
Okay.
She mixes that with some like olive oil and a few things.
We used soybean oil in prison, but that wasn't because it was good or higher quality. It was because that was the cheapest. So that was what the BOP provided us. But I don't know.
You start getting down the rabbit hole about canola oil. So canola oil was originally an engine lubricant.
Okay.
It was what was used for engine lubricant and diesel fuel, essentially, before there was the modern day petroleum lubricants that we have now.
That doesn't necessarily bother me because like Viagra was initially meant to be a blood pressure medication.
Okay.
So some things they are developed for one purpose, but they turn out to work better for another purpose.
So here's what I know about hydrogenated oils. So hydrogenated oils would be an oil that's superheated. So part of the processing, part of the problem with canola oil is it's all sprayed with tons of Roundup everywhere.
Okay, yeah.
A lot of it's grown in Canada. Same infiltration with the Bill Gates and Monsanto, all in Canadian farming, a lot of Brazilian farming now. And actually in India, they basically kicked them out. And Iraq was a big deal years ago where they kicked essentially the whole Monsanto, stuff out of Iraq. They destroyed all the date trees. Right. All kinds of stuff. But
we
anyways,
should do the same in the United States.
Right. The thing with hydrogenated oils, they're known as the Hateful Eight. So if you do a Hateful Eight image, it shows all these different types of oils, vegetable oils, seed oils, and what they are is they're concentrated oils, they're sticky proteins. To process them, the reason they like to put these in ultra processed and processed foods is because it makes the cookie really soft. It makes everything, the texture good. It lasts a really long time. Because what they do is they take in a bleach with some kind of hexane type butane thing, chemical, I don't remember exactly, like canola oil, for example. And then they take and they do some ultra heating to it to process it. Now, when you heat it up hot, it becomes a hydrogenated oil, which actually becomes a sticky protein in your body, and it's very difficult for your body to deal with it. And what your body does with these hydrogenated oils is it uses it as cholesterol. Cholesterol is basically the building blocks of your cells. So your body replicates red blood cells most often. So when your red blood cells are made from the hydrogenated oil, whether it's soybean, canola, Crisco, vegetable oil, corn oil, any of these oils, now the cell membrane is not...
Excepting olive oil, right? Which is somewhat more natural.
So if you heat up olive oil, it still becomes a sticky protein.
Okay, but normal extra virgin olive oil?
Yes, if you like cold, just left cold, if it is actually extra virgin olive oil, and unless you like...
Well, it was like $26 for a bottle of it, so it better be. It
better be, right. But there's definitely olive oils that are testing not 100% pure olive oil.
Oh, man.
There's, I don't know where you go find that, but I've seen some stuff about that. And the thing is you don't know what it is unless you watch the guy make it. This is why everybody should be either trying to grow their own stuff. Obviously, we're not going to be able to get olives here and deal with olives here. But I like, for a cooking, I encourage people to use either lard or tallow, like bacon grease, or tallow's the fat from a cow, or butter to cook in, because it's extremely stable.
I use butter for that.
Yep, that's
not the
good.
Canola. The canola oil really only goes in the salad dressing.
Yep. So I don't know how processed your canola oil is that you're getting. I mean, that would...
I mean, it's probably your typical supermarket trash.
Yeah, so it's probably got all the processing to it. But what happens is when your red blood cells replicate, they don't use the actual animal fat-based cholesterol that you would get from your tallow or your lard or your grass-fed milk to make the red blood cells. The red blood cells are now made from these hydrogenated oil molecules, and the red blood cell now has a really hard time dealing with sugar, has a really hard time absorbing sugar. So what happens is your blood sugar, there's tons of sugar in your blood, but the sugar isn't being transported by the red blood cells because the osmosis absorption of the sugar can't happen when your red blood cells are manufactured from these hydrogenated oils. So all you got to do is eat like a fast food meal of French fries once a week, and you're going to totally jack your body up for the entire week on dealing with sugar. So your brain's going to be lacking sugar, your eyes are going to be lacking sugar, parts of your body, muscles are going to be lacking sugar because your body can't efficiently transport the sugar, distribute it through everywhere it needs because of hydrogenated oils, and then you crave more sugar. So this is why a lot of people, this is where diabetes starts happening. And then so this is in all the ultra-processed foods. And then, of course, all the fast food, everything you get, all the people who are eating the ultra-processed foods are just putting down tons of sugar at the same time. Pretty much everybody who's going to McDonald's to get their lunch or their dinner or their breakfast, whether they're buying an orange juice, which is just a ton of sugar, is a less evil sugar than the Coca-Cola or the Pepsi you might buy. But they're eating all these hydrogenated oils. I
love orange juice, but that said, I eat actual oranges as well. So
it's a less evil sugar than like Coca-Cola.
Right. But you're right. There is a lot of sugar in orange juice.
Like I don't let my kids drink any juice at all. We drink water. The only juice my kids get to drink is some kefir water, which is like a fermented beverage, almost like kombucha that my wife makes.
Okay.
So it basically doesn't have any sugar in it, but it's got a bunch of probiotics in it, and it's really good.
I made my own orange juice in prison, because we would get oranges each day, and I could save up like 20, 25 of them, and you could use that to produce about a pint of orange juice. It was a tedious process. Your hand squeezing these oranges to get the juice out of them.
Damn.
And it would take me about 3 hours to produce a drinkable amount of orange juice. But when you're in prison, you've got nothing else to do anyway.
But the sugars and the seed oils and the processed foods are literally killing people, and they're creating dementia, the Alzheimer's, the diabetes, and no doctors are telling any of their patients. I got a relative who's 73 years old, and they, diabetes, they want to put him on insulin. His wife's on insulin, blah, 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 all this stuff. And I'm like, are they talking to you about not consuming sugars, not consuming, real sugar is like, let's call it heroin, and all the fake substitute sugars are methadone. Are they telling you to get off the ultra-processed foods? No, we can eat anything. We'll just take the insulin.
Yeah. When I was in prison, I was flirting with high blood pressure, and I used diet and exercise in order to defeat it. And the nurse actually told me, well, that's not good. And That explanation is exactly what I would expect of modern doctors. She just kept trying to prescribe me blood pressure medications, and she was upset that I beat it with diet and exercise.
Uncovering the secrets and exposing the lies. That's what the readers of freedomsphoenix.com get every day. freedomsphoenix.com, constantly providing the information, the real news about government policies, and the real relationship we all have with the coercive government. The real condition of the economy, innovations in technology, breakthroughs in energy, health, and computer science. Learn the truth well before it's admitted to in the lamestream media. The corporate media, nothing more than distributors of government propaganda, but now there's an alternative. freedomsphoenix.com. Constant news updates on the issues that affect your life in the most important ways. With liberty and property under constant attack, freedomsphoenix.com provides the understanding behind the propaganda, and it encourages the participation of its readers. Go to freedomsphoenix.com. That's freedoms with an S, phoenix.com. freedomsphoenix.com. The revolution between the ears has already happened.
From Feature Story News in Washington, I'm Nick Harper. US Vice President Kamala Harris has said Joe Biden's legacy of accomplishments is unmatched in modern history. She spoke at an event at the White House, her first public comments since Biden said he would not seek re-election. Harris did not mention her campaign to become her party's nominee. Instead, she praised Biden and his accomplishments during his 3.5 years in office.
Joe Biden's legacy of accomplishment over the past 3 years is unmatched in modern history. In one term, he has already, yes, you may clap. In one term, he has already surpassed the legacy of most presidents who have served 2 terms in office.
Meanwhile, former House Speaker Nancy Pelosi has endorsed Harris, writing in a statement that she did so with immense pride and limitless optimism for the country's future. She added that her enthusiastic support for Kamala Harris is official, personal, and political. Harris is rallying support as she tries to become the Democrats' nominee after President Biden dropped his re-election bid. Democrats, including Congressman Joaquin Castro, are rallying behind her.
I've been in different conversations already with folks in the Congressional Progressive Caucus, the Hispanic Caucus, and others who are ready to support the vice president. What I've seen among my colleagues so far is overwhelming support for Kamala Harris to be the new presidential nominee.
Meanwhile, President Joe Biden's doctor says his COVID-19 symptoms have almost resolved completely. Biden is scheduled to meet Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu in Washington on Tuesday. Biden remains, though, at his residence in Rehoboth Beach, Delaware, where he's been since last Wednesday. Netanyahu is also expected to meet Vice President Harris during his visit. The director of the U.S. Secret Service, Kimberly Cheatle, has been answering tough questions at a congressional hearing about security failings in the attempted assassination of Donald Trump on July the 13th. Cheatle has pledged to prevent anything like it from happening again, but many lawmakers appeared unconvinced, as FSN's Caroline Malone reports.
Hours and hours of tough questioning, and yet few revelations about why the Secret Service teams at the rally in Butler, Pennsylvania, were not able to stop the shooting before it happened. Secret Service Director Kimberly Cheatle says they have a distinction between suspicious activity and threatening, and the risk level was deemed okay for Trump to take the stage that day. She also talked of consultations between the Secret Service and Trump's campaign staff for 5 days before the event, in reference to questions about why the shooter was able to access a rooftop with a clear shot of the stage that was actually outside the security perimeter. There are now calls for Cheatle to stand down, and investigations into the whole incident continue. Caroline Malone, Washington.
From Bureaus Worldwide, this is FSN.
Our Matrix server is about as free as internet chat can be. Join the existing rooms or create your own at chat.freetalklive.com.
Free Talk Live. You can join us 603-283-6160 if you would like to weigh in. Again, that number is 603-283-6160. And with you tonight, it's Arya,
Jay, and Mr. Penguin.
Sorry, I did that well before you were ready. My bad. If I was better host, I would have been paying attention, but it is what it is.
Hey, if I was better co-host, I'd be paying attention.
I want to tell you about LibertyMinded.com because we are also brought to you by LibertyMinded.com. You can find their official Free Talk Live gear like t-shirts and hoodies at LibertyMinded.com. Plus, there's a unique collection of cool and funny Liberty-oriented clothing. Again, that's LibertyMinded.com. And cool news, the mobile studio has actually reached my house in Winchester today because we are the same person who runs LibertyMinded.com, and I'm not going to refer to them by name because I don't know if they've ever been referred to by name. I assume they have because they used to co-host the show, and they just sort of stopped after COVID-19, or they had stopped briefly prior to COVID-19 and then returned for one episode during, and it turned out that immediately after that, everyone involved with Free Talk Live just about got COVID-19. And it turned this person off of the show. Still a really great person, really great liberty activist. Anyway, they are also designing the new wrap for the Free Talk Live mobile studio, which is going to be fantastic. It's going to take several months for this massive project to get done because it's a big trailer. And there's a lot of surface to work with and windows in particular places that have to be designed around. But it's going to look fantastic. And then Bonnie and I are going to have to find some company that does this sort of thing to actually get it put on there. It's going to be awesome, though, and you can thank him for his work by going to LibertyMinded.com and buying a Free Talk Live t-shirt or hoodie or just one of the random bumper stickers or other cool things that you can find there at LibertyMinded.com. Again, that is LibertyMinded.com. We are a call-in show, and we do have callers. We actually had one call during the previous segment, but we were having such a good conversation. I was hoping to find out what I could consume other than canola oil. And we have someone on the phone who wants to talk about that, but I made him wait long enough. Dodger, you are with us on Free Talk Live. What's on your mind tonight? Are you there? Dodger?
Yes. So I have almost, I'm pretty sure that my brother is more anarchist than I am.
Okay. Is this a good thing or a bad thing?
Oh, that's a great thing.
Can you explain? I'm not sure what more anarchist would really mean. One either advocates for rulers or one advocates for anarchism. I'm not sure.
One advocates for I don't give an F.
Okay.
With all of the political crap that's been going on, for
Roger,
me,
I don't mean to be rude, but how many drinks have you had tonight?
Okay, I guess I'll say good night.
Good night.
All right. Thank you so much for the call there, Dodger. I didn't mean you. I would have liked an answer to the question, I guess, but it is what it is. Anyway, thank you for the call, and congrats on your brother being an anarchist. I think my family's definitely gone the other direction, but my sister in particular, she's almost certainly a dyed-in-the-wool status now because her continued existence is going to rely so much on welfare.
Yeah, there's a massive problem with single moms.
Yeah,
it is impossible for a single mom, nearly impossible for them to, without any outside support, if they got no man supporting them, no family supporting them, then they default to the state, and the state is very happy to, they want them there. They incentivize them because then now they capture the kids, they got the future, and it's creating this dependency class that they want.
We also have Matthew on the line with us, though. Matthew, you are on Free Talk Live.
Yeah, I was calling in because canola gets a pretty bad rap, but canola oil is really just a GMO rapeseed. Like it's what they did was they took rapeseed and they made it so that it didn't have urusic acid in it anymore, which is something that only Asians can really digest effectively. And so it's really just rapeseed oil without the acid that most other people cannot digest.
Okay, that's fascinating. I don't know anything about any of this, unfortunately, as much as I am about how, hey, you should eat carrots or whatever instead of Doritos. I feel like if you're eating carrots, though, and you occasionally have carrot oil, you're probably doing significantly better health-wise than the person who's eating Doritos and McDonald's.
Well, so the thing is that like rape is a naturally occurring plant in East Asia, and it's been used. Like if you go to an Asian grocery store, like they've just got rapeseed oil everywhere because it's a fundamental part of cooking in East Asia. The problem is that Asians are really the only people that can digest it in large quantities. So for a while, it causes indigestion and inflammation. And so what they did was they just bred it selectively over the course of decades in Canada. That's where canola comes from. It was developed in Canada, and so basically it's rapeseed oil, which is a high temp oil, like Jay said, but it doesn't have the erucic acid that causes so many indigestion problems in people that are not Asian.
And by high temp, what they talk about is the smoke point. Like avocado oil has a 500-degree smoke point, but the problem is it's stable.
Ooh, avocado oil. That's one I should look into.
Yeah, avocado oil is a pretty good one. And that might be would be probably really good for your salad dressing, the avocado oil.
Oh, that's really true.
And but the thing is when you superheat these oils, that's where it converts into a sticky protein. And from what I do understand, canola oil is one of the lesser, according to some stuff I've read, less bad. It's like the Donald Trump of oils. Seed oils is like it's less bad than like soybean oil. But I got a friend that, for example, if he consumes anything that has canola oil in it, he is sick to his stomach for multiple days at a time.
Man. Thank you, Matthew, for the information. I certainly didn't know any of that. And, I've got something to look into now when we leave the show tonight. Avocado oil in particular, this is not the first time I heard about it. I heard about it recently doing something else as well, but I was busy and didn't look into it. I've now made a note because I had never had an avocado until I got out of prison. And I ended up getting a poke bowl from somewhere because I wasn't allowed to leave the halfway house, so I had to use DoorDash if I wanted something. And they offered me technically vegetarian options, but it was basically just a salad. And there's only so much salad you can eat. I mean, you need other nutrients beyond what you get from a store-bought salad. So I would DoorDash in this poke bowl, and I had avocados added to it, and I was shocked by how delicious it was.
Yeah, and it's an excellent fat for you. It's a really good
I ended up
fat.
eating, and I know what people are going to say, avocado toast. And I was shocked by how much I enjoyed it. And now I'm one of those people who eats avocado toast.
Yeah, my wife makes avocado toast all the time, and for the kids, we put sprinkles on it. But the sprinkles are, it's like it's the everything but the bagel seasoning. I don't know if you've ever seen that. You get a little shaker. And that's
so
what
it's a bunch of grains and stuff, right?
Yeah, it's basically the topping of an everything bagel. So we'll put that on top of the avocado toast and
like probably sesame seeds and what's the other kind of seed that people are always eating?
I don't remember. Poppy seed, sesame seed. There's a couple different things on there.
I was thinking about the one that you have to bite into it to get the actual seed out, and then you spit the husk out. They're really popular at ball. That's it. That's what I was thinking
sunflower
of.
seeds. Yeah, that could be in there.
Yeah, so they are really good, and I was shocked to find that at the time I had not resumed smoking yet, so I was like, I'm one of those people now. Like, I wake up and I go jogging, and then I eat avocado toast, and I just kind of hate myself at the moment because
you shouldn't hate yourself. Just embrace it if you like it.
Well, I ended up starting back
you.
smoking, so the jogging thing has stopped, but I'm in the process of quitting smoking again, so that's got like maybe 2 weeks left before I'm done with that again. And then I'll be back out there jogging and exercising and doing all of that great stuff that I found in prison. No amount of doing it made it more enjoyable. Like there's some people who love running. I talked to, when Matt Roach visited me in prison, I talked with him about this. He was like, what do you mean you hate running? I love running. I feel great after doing it. And I'm like, I absolutely hate it. The entire time I'm doing it, I hate it. And there was this dude in prison we called Nigeria. His name was Paul. And I got out there jogging with him. He got me out there at 6:20 every Friday morning to go jogging. And he was just a beast. He would start jogging around the track and he would go for like 3 solid hours, just nonstop, just running in this massive 1/4 mile track. And I can't imagine having that sort of stamina. Like I could do one lap and then I would have to walk a lap and then jog another lap. But this dude, the entire time for 2-3 hours straight, would just jog. And then he would come back like, oh, I feel great. I'm refreshed. I'm like, how do you not want to go into a hole and die? Because that's what I want to do. But some people just enjoy running, apparently. And like Matt Roach is one of them. And some people don't. And I'm one of those.
I love working in the hot heat.
Yeah.
Like stacking hay on these really hot days, as that's what I love doing.
Like even these 90-degree-ish days?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, like doing hot yoga, no problem. I love hot yoga. But as a kid, I was always stacking hay as a little kid with people because we did a lot of hay. We were in the horse business. My uncles and my grandfathers were hay dealers. And I can remember being a little kid just wanting to be one of the men, being able to like throw that bale of hay right up there and, just doing it. And it was, one of the ways I earned my dopamine hits as a kid. And now as an adult, I love, working hard and sweating, and it's really good for you. Sweating's good for you. It cleans your body out a lot. And
that's curious because I do enjoy riding my bike. And that's a really good thing for my dog because that exercises her a lot faster because she's jogging with me to stay alongside me. And I don't mind doing that regardless of how hot it is or what the temperature is. And I did ride my bike a lot as a child. I did not do a whole lot of jogging and running. I played, sports and those involved running and jogging, but I never just went jogging as a child or engaged in any sort of activities like that would have required me to go jogging for long distances. I did, however, ride my bike a lot. And now as an adult, it's just like you enjoy doing hay outside, I enjoy riding my bike.
So I've been doing a lot of jogging and running and sprinting this summer, but
congrats.
What I've been doing is my kids have a little 50cc 4-wheeler, a little gas powered 4-wheeler. Yeah. And so I got a strap I hooked up to the back of it.
So you do have 2 kids. I wasn't sure.
Yeah.
Okay.
So my 2-year-old, my son will be 3 in September. His name is Cash. And my daughter Cypress is 4. She'll be 5 in January. So anyways, I got this ATV for the kids. Actually, Jack Shimek, a good friend of mine, gave it to me. Somebody gave it to him for his grandson, but his daughter didn't want it. So I got it, and we got it using it. And it's a cheap Chinese, very expensive, not really well engineered. So like my 4-year-old daughter, actually right now, she can just about apply the brakes. I've been letting her ride it by herself. My son, his hands aren't big enough to like apply the brakes. It doesn't have like a good like brake setup.
Okay.
So I'm the brakes. And also my son, he just wants to hammer down all the time.
Yeah.
My daughter's very conservative. She doesn't, run it fast. And so I put a strap behind it and I run behind the kids.
Okay.
So this thing will do about 40 minutes on a tank of gas. It's just got a little gas tank on it.
So when you say you're the brakes,
yep.
Can you actually?
Oh yeah.
I don't know what a 50cc
is. It's very small. Probably weighs like 60 pounds.
So if you stop running and you like stand your ground, you can stop it.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah. I could totally stop it. Now, if it was like a big,
that is a really awesome solution to the problem.
Oh yeah. So my homeschool co-op that I do, I have a bunch of my buddies' kids coming over, a bunch of Free Stater kids. I love the homeschool co-op and I love bragging about it because I got all these kids that half of them are like living in a city, so they're either in a house in a city, a townhouse, or a condo, or an apartment, and they're like, Farmer Jay, I'm ready to shovel pig poop. I'm ready to clean the chicken eggs. They just want to do all this work, but because they're not on a farm, so they're really thirsty for it. Okay. And then my kids love showing off their talent. They're like, oh, I know how to work this pitchfork. I know how to work this shovel. All this stuff. I know how to do these things. So one of the things we do is we let them ride the 4-wheeler. So about once a week, I do a good, hour of just running and jogging behind the 4-wheeler. And then with my kids, a couple more times a week, I'll, not every single day we ride the 4-wheeler, but a few times, or they ride the 4-wheeler, but a few times a week they ride the 4-wheeler, or their buddies do. And I got to be the frontal lobe because until your kids, reach the age where their frontal lobe actually is totally wired to the brain, mom and dad or whoever's around needs to be the frontal lobe for them.
And what do you mean by that?
So my 2-year-old son would just run full throttle right into a tree on the 4-wheeler because he's just not going to, he doesn't know how bad it's going to hurt or realize it because his frontal lobe isn't totally wired yet.
So you mean be the decision maker?
Don't you need to let him run into a tree, at some point so that he learns?
Yeah.
Isn't that usually how most kids learn?
but not on a machine that can, go
Maybe on a
along
bike, right?
25 miles an hour. Now, on his bicycle, not his bicycle, he got a balance bike. So my 2-year-old was tooling all over Porkfest on his balance bike, and he balances just fine. In fact, he was pedaling a bike this weekend. We went up to Jerry Jam in Vermont, and he found a pedal bike up there that was his size, and he goes pedaling by on. He stole some kid's bike, and it was just laying there. He gets on it and goes, But
2-year-olds, man.
But
or
when
3.
when they're on the 4-wheeler that can go 18, 20 miles an hour probably, and I can dial the throttle back. I can govern it a lot, and that's what I do. But he just can't apply the brakes on it. So even if he wants to stop, all he can do is let off the throttle. He can't apply the brakes. He's not strong enough. So I got to be the brakes. And I'll tell you that that running around at the festival we were at this weekend, I'm carrying both of my kids. One on my shoulders, one on my arms, or one on each arm, going back and forth. Same thing at Porkfest. I'm going from the pavilion up the hill to where we're camping, and it's
That's
later on.
exhausting when your arms aren't full.
And, and I'm carrying kids, and I'm walking and talking to somebody at the same time, and this woman I'm talking to, she's in good shape. She's not out of shape. She's fit. She's like, wow, that's really impressive. You can walk while carrying 2 kids and talk, and she's winded trying to keep up with me. Yeah. But I do it all the time and every day. And running behind the little 4-wheeler is I have fun with it. I like it, and I wasn't really into running, but a couple years ago we had a whole bunch of pigs get loose, so me and Neil Smith and Silver Dave spent 3 hours in the woods just running around trying to herd up these pigs. And at the end of it, we were like, wow, it was a lot of work. And Dave's like, but it was fun. And I'm like, you know what? It was kind of fun. We got we got the pigs all gathered up. Nobody got hurt. But yeah, we were literally running around for 3 hours in the woods chasing pigs.
That more than anything is the number one reason I hate that I ever started back smoking. And if you're a smoker out there, you think you're in better shape than you are. And even after quitting smoking, I thought I was in better shape than I was until I got to prison and we played a game of softball. And I was beat to death the next day. I was like, man, I thought, first of all, I hadn't played in 20-something years, so I wasn't even able to catch the ball like I thought I was going to be. The last time I played, I was 1.5 foot shorter than I am now. And I did end up being able to re-hone my skills and was able to catch the ball and throw the ball. I actually hit a home run while there. I was one of about 4 people capable of that, actually hitting it over the fence. And now we've got to get a CO, a correctional officer, to go out into the graveyard to get the ball because Arya hit it over the fence, right? So I was able to get that back over time, but I thought I would be in significantly better shape than I was. And if you're a smoker, you're lying to yourself about this. And when I got out of prison, I started back smoking because I was under a lot of stress, and that was a good decision for 1 day. But I should have never kept smoking the following day. And that was where I erred. But that night that I started back, yes, that was the right decision for that moment. I don't doubt that even now. But it took less than a week before all of that work that I had done to rebuild my lung capacity, to be able to walk upstairs without a problem. I delivered an item for someone, and by the time it was a 2nd-story set of stairs. By the time I got to the top, I was winded. And it had been less than a week of being back on cigarettes that this had happened. So in less than a week, it just completely destroyed my lung capacity. A year ago, I was able to walk around everywhere at Porkfest with my dog. No problem, carrying on conversations with people just fine. Plenty of energy, plenty of lung capacity to carry on conversations while walking around. This year, even just walking up to the top of the hill, I was out of breath. And it's all because of cigarettes. That's the one great big difference there. I should have been in better shape this year after a year of playing sports and exercising for 3 hours a day. But because I made that stupid decision to return to cigarettes, all of that was destroyed. And it'll come back once I quit smoking.
Right.
It will come back, and I will still be able to regain all of the muscle coordination and all of that crap. It'll be easier now to rehome my skills than it was when I was in prison. But quit smoking is basically what I'm getting at. It's doing more damage to your health than you realize. And it happens so much faster than you realize.
So I was a firefighter for 19 years, Bonzville Fire Department, Massachusetts. And I learned a lot about carbon monoxide poisoning. smoke inhalation. Like you could really damage yourself hardcore for life by inhaling a big breath of nasty smoke from inside of a house. So it was like very important to,
I'm sure with all the insulation and
all
other
that crap,
stuff burning.
Like one of these cushions we're sitting on catches on fire, and just this little cushion burns. It fills this entire house with nasty smoke.
Yeah, poison essentially.
Right. So our Scott packs, self-contained breathing apparatus, stuff was very important. So one of the things that we learned about carbon monoxide poisoning is that your red blood cells that transfer your oxygen to the rest of your body absorb carbon monoxide, and this number could be off, but the number I remember is 750 times quicker than it absorbs oxygen. Or it takes 750 times longer to get rid of the carbon monoxide. I forget how all this works, but it absorbs very easy, and it takes a very long time for your red blood cells to get rid of the carbon monoxide. Well, while there's carbon monoxide in these red blood cells that are carrying oxygen to the rest of your body, there's no room for oxygen in your body. In the red blood cells.
That makes sense why it would happen. It would have happened so quickly.
Yes.
Because I was taken off guard by how quickly my lung capacity and my ability to do basic things like walk upstairs.
And what had happened, because you quit smoking for a little while and you were doing some more exercise between your running, playing softball, whatever you had going on, and now your like red blood cells were at this full like oxygen capacity, and then you smoke cigarettes for a week or two, and your body's used to having like a lot of oxygen to do the work, to make all this muscle function happen, and then it wasn't used to being oxygen deprived. But to where like a lot of people who are chronic pack a day, 2 packs a day smokers are quite literally depriving their body of oxygen, at a level that their body learns to manage. So they don't even realize they're doing it or realize it's happening. And that was was a good thing that you figured it out kind of the hard way. But
Years ago, when I was doing IT, I went up to a second floor office, and when I got there, the girl asked me, "Are you okay? Do you need a moment?" And I was like, "Yeah, I'm fine. What are you talking about?" She goes, "You're out of breath." And I'd been smoking at that point for 10 years or whatever, since I was 12 years old, and I had never noticed how out of breath I was. Of course, you would think that would spur me to quit smoking, but I didn't for another 10 years or whatever. But
and you're in fairly good shape. You're not like overweight,
right?
And I've definitely I do have a pretty good friend who's a smoker, and he's a little younger than me, and he's a lot thinner than me, and he's a lot more jacked. And when it would come to like moving hay, stacking firewood, I could just run circles around him.
I don't doubt it at all.
But I don't smoke, so
like. I briefly lived in a third floor apartment, and taking something up from the basement of that place where my stuff was to the third floor of the apartment was excruciating. It was almost torture.
It was a workout.
Yeah, to have to go that far. And then you're like, okay, that was one box. I have 45 more boxes to do. There's a reason that by the time I moved out of that place into the house I'm in now, almost everything I had was still in that basement waiting on me. Because one, I had to have the energy to work afterward, and by then I'd started back smoking like an idiot.
That seems like a lot of work, even if you're in pretty healthy shape.
Well, the movers didn't struggle with it. Right?
Well, yeah, except they're not in pretty healthy shape. They're like in the top shape of their, any.
So was I when I first got out of prison. Like, I was in the best shape of my life. I could jog, I could bike at a very high difficulty, basically going uphill for 3 hours straight. I did 3 hours of hardcore cardio every single day, with my heart rate frequently between 160 and 170 beats per minute. And I threw all of that away in less than a week of smoking. And it's because of that carbon monoxide that Jay mentioned, as well as other things. There's more coming up here, including President Biden stepping down and apparently Democrats forfeiting. It's Free Talk Live.
So the protection of life, liberty, and property is what the Free State Project is all about. But it's an effort to move 20,000 people who understand.
It's about demonstrating to the entire country
that, yeah, we can have a free market, a truly free market.
Making it just a freer, great place to live.
It's the world's largest voluntarist libertarian community, and it's only getting bigger.
That's amazing, to be able to move to a place where other people passionately believe in being free and independent.
What the Free State Project is managing to do, though, is to put their money where their mouth is. Physically getting up across the country and saying, let's go someplace and let's demonstrate the power of these ideas. There's a lot of kind of philosophy that surrounds liberty. There's a lot of thinking about it and talking about it. But here in New Hampshire, people are doing it.
101 Reasons Liberty Lives in New Hampshire, a documentary by Free State Project Early Movers. Watch it free at 101reasonsfilm.com. 101reasonsfilm.com.
There are basically two types of advertising: direct response and branding. Radio's great for direct response with its low cost to listener ratio, but audio can't be beat for branding, which is a longer term endeavor. You want to be the first thing that someone thinks of when they think about your product or service. If you have a local business that you want kept top of mind in your community, call the station. If you need national reach, Free Talk Live's got around 200 radio stations, millions of monthly listening sessions, can suit all budgets, and if we don't think we're right for you, we'll tell you. Email me, mark@freetalklive.com.
Tired of cancel culture? Sick of mega tech corporations holding an axe over your head? Join the LRN.FM Matrix chat server. It's self-hosted, so no one else can tell us what to do or say. Don't like the existing channels? You can make your own. You can even connect into some of our channels from other Matrix servers. It's federated. For the full LRN.FM Matrix experience, though, you should join our server via the step-by-step instructions at chat.lrn.fm. Chat.lrn.fm.
You're listening to the live edition of Free Talk Live. Hour number 3 is next after the news here on the Liberty Radio Network at LRN.FM.
From Feature Story News in Washington, I'm Nick Harper. US Vice President Kamala Harris has said Joe Biden's legacy of accomplishments is unmatched in modern history. She spoke at an event at the White House, her first public comments since Biden said he would not seek re-election. Harris did not mention her campaign to become her party's nominee. Instead, she praised Biden and his accomplishments during his 3.5 years in office.
Joe Biden's legacy of accomplishment over the past 3 years is unmatched in modern history. In one term, he has already, yes, you may clap. In one term, he has already surpassed the legacy of most presidents who have served 2 terms in office. His honesty, his integrity, his commitment to his faith and his family, his big heart, and his love, deep love of our country. And I am firsthand witness that every day our President Joe Biden fights for the American people, and we are deeply, deeply grateful for his service to our nation.
Meanwhile, former House Speaker Nancy Pelosi has endorsed Harris, writing in a statement that she did so with immense pride and limitless optimism for the country's future. She added that her enthusiastic support for Kamala Harris is official, personal, and political. Harris is rallying support as she tries to become the Democrats' nominee after President Biden dropped his re-election bid. Democrats, including Congressman Joaquin Castro, are rallying behind her.
I've been in different conversations already with folks in the Congressional Progressive Caucus, the Hispanic Caucus, and others who are ready to support the vice president. What I've seen among my colleagues so far is overwhelming support for Kamala Harris to be the new presidential nominee.
Meanwhile, President Joe Biden's doctor says his COVID-19 symptoms have almost resolved completely. Biden is scheduled to meet Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu in Washington on Tuesday. Biden remains, though, at his residence in Rehoboth Beach, Delaware, where he's been since last Wednesday. Netanyahu is also expected to meet Vice President Harris during his visit. The director of the U.S. Secret Service, Kimberly Cheatle, has been answering tough questions at a congressional hearing about security failings in the attempted assassination of Donald Trump on July the 13th. Cheatle has pledged to prevent anything like it from happening again, but many lawmakers appeared unconvinced, as FSN's Caroline Malone reports.
Hours and hours of tough questioning, and yet few revelations about why the Secret Service teams at the rally in Butler, Pennsylvania, were not able to stop the shooting before it happened. Secret Service Director Kimberly Cheatle says they have a distinction between suspicious activity and threatening, and the risk level was deemed okay for Trump to take the stage that day. She also talked of consultations between the Secret Service and Trump's campaign staff for 5 days before the event, in reference to questions about why the shooter was able to access a rooftop with a clear shot of the stage that was actually outside the security perimeter. There are now calls for Cheatle to stand down, and investigations into the whole incident continue. Caroline Malone, Washington.
From Bureaus Worldwide, this is FSN. In that hearing, House Oversight Committee Chairman James Comer accused the agency and Cheatle of failing to protect the former president and the rally-goers in Pennsylvania.
It is my firm belief, Director Cheatle, that you should resign. However, in complete defiance, Director Cheatle has maintained she will not tender her resignation. Therefore, she will answer questions today from members of this committee seeking to provide clarity to the American people about how these events were allowed to transpire. A former president and current candidate for president was shot in the head by a sniper within 500 feet of the podium. This is unacceptable, and we are concerned the Secret Service lacks the proper management to keep protectees safe from bad actors.
Hundreds of migrants from Central and South America are making their way to the US southern border by foot, hoping to reach the US before November's elections. FSN's Tony Waterman has more from Austin, Texas.
The caravan left from Mexico's southern border on Sunday, and according to the Associated Press, some of the migrants say they are hoping to reach U.S. soil before the November election. They are afraid that if Donald Trump reclaims the White House, he'll completely shut down the border to asylum seekers. Right now, migrants must use an app to get an appointment at border crossings. Besides closing the border, the former president has also pledged mass deportations of migrants who are already in the U.S. Tony Waterman, Texas.
There's more from us on X at Feature Story. That's Feature Story News. Nick Harper reporting.
From the day an ancient cave dweller painted yet another elk hunt on a wall in 15,000 BC, to Gary Marshall's 1974 discovery of 13 weather-beaten North Dakotan coal miners that would go on to become the cast of Happy Days, The Onion looks back at This Week in History. On June 17, 1954, the effects of the previous month's historic Supreme Court ruling in Brown versus the Board of Education provided black students with the educational opportunity of experiencing racism firsthand in desegregated schools. Up until that point, African American pupils could only endure racial slurs and death threats in city streets or near their homes. And on June 24, 1784, 13-year-old Edward Warren took the first hot air balloon flight, becoming the first American to urinate on a crowd from 100 feet in the air. And that was what happened this week in history.
This is the Onion News Network.
You can stick it to the man and big tech. Join our FTL social mastodon at social.freetalklive.com.
Free Talk Live.
It is Free Talk Live, and you can join us 603-283-6160 if you want to do that. Again, that's 603-283-6160. And with you in the studio tonight, it's Aria,
Jay, and Mr. Penguin.
And I was going to, here it is. I want to thank Rick Hall for being an amplifier of the show. This means that Rick Hall has joined our Patreon. You can find that at amps.freetalklive.com. That's amps.freetalklive.com. Or you can just look for Free Talk Live on Patreon or go to patreon.com/freetalklive. Probably there's countless ways to find it. $5 per month gets you in. That's all we ask for. There's no real benefits. Like we're not offering you anything in return for this. There's no real perk or anything like that we're going to offer you. There's no tier benefits to speak of. If you do it, it should be because you want to show your support for the show. And joining the AMPS program is the best way to do that, as Rick Hall here has done. Rick, thank you so much for your support. Rick is a silver level member, and again, that's all we ask for you is $5 per month. You can contribute more than that if you want, but we don't ask that. you do actually get the Free Talk cast a day earlier than everyone else. It releases once a week, as we said earlier, and it releases on Friday at midnight. So as soon as the clock turns over to Friday, the episode of Free Talk cast for that week drops. But if you're an amplifier at amps.freetalklive.com, you get it Thursday at midnight. So as soon as the day hits Thursday, you get the podcast a day early than everyone else. But that's not really a perk. That's just a bonus I threw in there because I was already doing it on my own Patreon anyway. It only took like half a second to just copy and paste it to the Free Talk Live Patreon. So check that out, amps.freetalklive.com. Rick, thank you so much for your support. We're talking here about a variety of subjects, and that's one of the reasons I love having you on, Jay, because all of these things sort of tie back together, or they tie into one another, just leading a healthy, productive life.
Right.
And a lot of people fail to do those basic things. And they don't even realize that they're failing to live healthy, productive, considered lives.
That's why I am literally grooming my children to lead healthy, productive lives. And I see you shaking your head over there.
I love the phrasing.
Grooming.
Very interesting choice of words for sure.
So what is a groom? I was a horse show groom for a lot of years, and I was the groom when I wasn't riding the horse, because at the horse show, the groom is the guy who makes sure like the horse looks good and is all brushed up. And grooming a horse is you take the horse out from the pasture and you brush him up good and comb the hair and maybe braid the tails and braid the mane, whatever you're going to do. And I'm actually really good at braiding because I braided a lot of horses' tails and manes, growing up.
That's going to be really convenient for your daughter.
Yep. My wife loves that I can braid hair, her hair, my kids' hair.
That was one of the things I did with my hair in prison, because you don't have a hair straightener in prison. They're not going to let you have one. And my hair tends to get very wavy and unmanageable. And the way I dealt with this was by braiding it in a bunch of little strands, probably 50 or so, just straight down. And
so you had like cornrows or whatever?
Not cornrows, because they dangled. They were more like box braids is what they would be called, except they weren't as neat as they would be with like a colored person's hair in actual little boxes. But it was tedious, and it took about 3 hours to do, and then additional hour and a half to take them all out. So I didn't do it very often.
So yeah, grooming is basically training. And your hair, you tease it, or sometimes you train it, right? So I'm training my kids to, I'm very against sugar. I'm against processed foods. I'm against.
But you're not against fruit, right? Like
cereals.
If your kids wanted strawberries and blueberries.
So and for the past few days and for the next couple of weeks, my kids are picking blackberries constantly all day long because we have a ton of black raspberries.
Blackberries are also
that
good.
Grow all around the property, and we've learned how to prune them and fertilize them and make them so they produce
and
so
yet
much.
You brought none with you here today.
I did. My kids wiped them all out. They're just starting to come in. My kids pretty much wiped them all out today. And we just got home last night. We were gone for the weekend, so there was a bunch of ones ready to go, and they're still about 70% of them are red. And maybe next week I'll bring some down. But anyways, you
don't have to, obviously. I was just giving you a hard time. But if you do, I would absolutely eat some.
Okay, cool. And around your place, I'm surprised you once you learn how to sort of go out there in the springtime and prune them a little bit, and then I take all my chicken litter from my chicken coop and I put it on the ground around the berries as mulch, and then also when I clean out my livestock trailer, I'll use all that hay and bedding as mulch, because the berries have roots that are very close to the ground, so it's good to cover them every year with a layer of some kind of mulch, whether it be grass clippings or sawdust or just a bag of mulch you go buy down at the garden center.
So these berry bushes, they survive the winter each year?
Oh, yeah.
You don't have to, okay.
They keep coming back.
I'm definitely going to plant some of these on the edges of my property.
I'm sure you have them all over the place. They are everywhere in New Hampshire.
Okay.
So you go look around.
I just have to find them.
Yeah, go take a little look around now, and I'm sure you'll find some. The people talk to your neighbors a little bit who've been there for a little while.
Okay.
They may not want them because they are a little bit of a bear attractant. Bears love berries, and they'll be out there at 6 a.m. Nibbling on your berries when you come outside. I've never seen a bear on my property yet, but the farm I grew up on, Massachusetts, there would be bears eating the blackberries early in the morning.
Yeah, I live out sort of in the woods too now. There's woods on the edge of my property, so bears probably would be there, but bears aren't really going to be a problem.
No, you'll be fine.
Yeah,
unless they start eating your chickens.
Yeah.
They'll do that if you don't secure them Electric
for the most
fence.
part, bears, they're going to run off if they see a person. They're not there to have a fight. And if a bear wants some of my berries, like, I'll share. I don't care.
And it's really cute watching a bear nibble berries off a tree. Your dog will start eating them too. When the dogs like them also. But
I think my dog would try to befriend a bear because she tries to befriend everything.
Yep, maybe.
And like, I love the idea of my dog being friends with a bear.
Might not go so good for the dog.
No.
Especially if it's a mama bear.
I realize that bears are vicious and territorial and all of that, but like, part of me wants to pet a bear. And I never would. Obviously, I'm not an idiot. I would avoid a bear. But I can only imagine how soft their fur has to be. Right? It looks like it's probably very soft. Is it not? Or is it kind of wiry? Because it could go either way.
So I think the wife and kids pet a bear down in Florida at a wild cat place. They had bears there, different types of bears, and there was one that you could pet. And that's
the kind of circumstance where I would not object to petting a bear. But if like there was just one in my backyard, no, I would not try to pet it.
Yeah. This was, you put your hand through a fence, and the guy had like kind of like a halter thing on the bear, and the guy was in there with the bear, and he was a domesticated bear or whatever. I have to ask my daughter again about that because I forget what she told me about how it felt. But anyways, so with the solution to like all of our food issues and a lot of our health problems, and I was going to say all of our health problems, I'm not a doctor, this is not medical advice, but it's basically eating whole foods. So
I only eat whole grain bread, certainly, and a lot of people,
which is not a whole food.
It's not?
It's not because it's processed.
Okay. Well, I guess bread has to be processed,
Correct.
though.
Yeah.
But I guess it would be a whole food if I just ate the wheat, right?
Correct. Right.
Okay.
So, like, bread is, like, sort of iffy. Like, we've been doing this sourdough bread that we buy from a neighbor. So the biggest thing with bread for us is keeping the seed oils out of it. So all this bread that you buy in the store has got, some kind of seed oil, canola, soy, whatever, in it. And
I don't know, but that it's possible that's not true with the Killer Dave's bread that I've been buying because it's
probably not.
super expensive.
So Ezekiel bread is what we use. It's sprouted bread, and it doesn't have any seed oils in it.
I don't know whether
expensive.
or not Dave's Killer bread does or not. I buy it because it's delicious and it's got a lot of nutrients and vitamins and crap in it. And I don't eat white bread. They don't feed you white bread in prison. They only feed you wheat bread. And like I preferred wheat bread anyway because it's a little bit healthier than white bread. White bread is just sugar, but people love it.
So sugar is poison, and then when we juice our apples, juice the carrots, or if we took all those blackberries and juiced them, we would be extracting the fiber, removing the fiber, and consuming basically only the sugar. And the antidote to sugar, if sugar's a poison, the antidote to sugar is fiber. So you can really spike your blood by taking like blood glycemic index, blood sugar level by taking 6 or 7 apples and juicing them, and you're going to get like 6 ounces or 4 ounces of juice in the cup. And then you're going to get all that sugar to your body. But
so this is why you allow your kids to eat fruit,
right?
But not drink juices.
Yeah. So they eat apples, they eat the blackberries, they eat strawberries, they eat blueberries. They go pick blueberries. We have a bunch of blueberries. They didn't really do well this year at blueberries, but we're still learning how to deal with them.
That makes sense because the juice is realistically just sugar water that is flavored like that fruit.
Yep.
Right, and it's all the fiber and all of the other. I don't want to say crap, but all the other stuff. In the fruit that you have to actually chew and swallow. That provides the nutritional balance.
Right.
That makes sense.
So, and really the idea with like berries and stuff, we should only, if you're really going to be hardcore about this, you'd only consume them when they're in season locally. So you wouldn't eat them in the wintertime. But in the wintertime, we do still buy blueberries. And of course, they're from like California or Florida or Chile or Mexico or whatever. That was one thing I really liked about being in Mexico. Like all the like local like grocery stores or places where you would buy food staples, you could eat all the really awesome berries and raspberries and blackberries and blueberries and strawberries for very, very little money down there. But so much of that stuff is produced. The supply is pretty much a good chunk of North America all winter long. Mexican fruit.
Okay.
But You know, the same thing that costs $7 here in a grocery store for a thing of blueberries is like, was like, I don't know, less than $1.
And it has to be frozen before it can get to us.
Well, fresh ones. No. So a lot of your fresh fruit, like from Chile that you buy, blueberries, they're fresh, but they're shipped up here real quick and, refrigerated, containers and stuff.
Right.
And then, the frozen stuff we did last year, we froze a bunch of our Concord grapes that we harvest. They're not really that good to eat. And some other berries. Last year we did freeze some blackberries, a little bit of blueberries. This year we're gonna go pick a bunch of blueberries at a local place, and with the kids, and usually try to freeze half of them when we bring them home. But usually when you go picking blueberries with your kids, you eat about 3/4 of the blueberries that you actually pick, and you only bring like a quarter of them home. It seems like, which is fine. But
sure.
The thing is sugar is a gateway drug. The internet device is a gateway drug. And up until as our kids are young, is the only way the kids are going to be getting the processed garbage food is if you buy it, if you bring it into the house. And a lot of the problem is the parents are addicted to this stuff because they were raised on it. And if we start looking at, what brought on like margarine, for example, which is made from seed oils, which is really, really bad for you, which the American Heart Association still promotes the use of margarine.
Yeah, just buy butter. How much more expensive? It can't be that much more expensive, is it?
So butter's depending on the butter. So the butter I buy is butter from grass-fed cows, generally Kerrygold, which I trust Kerrygold that is made in Ireland because Ireland doesn't grow corn.
All right.
Ireland grows, you can pasture your cows year-round in Ireland because it's surrounded by water. It's a rainy, cool environment year-round. It's a humid environment, and the grass grows like crazy in Ireland. You know how they heat the homes in Ireland years ago is with something called peat. And peat is basically...
It's moss, right?
Yeah, it's basically this grass that just keeps growing and growing and growing that nobody has done anything with for multiple years, and it like stacks up and then is like a moss, and then they sort of like cut this out of like the ground. I don't know exactly how they harvest it,
right?
But and then
Some
they
sort
let
of
it dry,
process.
and then you can burn it. But grass grows like crazy in Ireland, so Ireland produces really, really high quality dairy products and beef because of the fact that it's grass fed. So I really like Kerrygold, and Kerrygold's expensive. It's it's like $4 for a half a pound, to where like your regular
What is that, 2 sticks?
2 sticks. Yep, it's like $3.99 or $4.29. A couple of years ago, it was like $2.79. 5 years ago, but it's expensive. But
still, cooking doesn't consume a huge amount of butter. When I moved into this place, I bought 4 sticks of butter, which I guess would be a pound.
Yep.
And I just today opened the 4th stick.
Yep. So
and part of it, one stick had to get thrown away because of a refrigerator malfunction that I had.
So we actually just leave a stick of butter in a little jar out on the countertop.
It makes it much easier to use.
And that thing will last on maybe 4 or 5 days in my house. But I have been literally feeding my kids all the butter they could eat, grass-fed from grass-fed cows, their entire life, because butter, that fat in that butter, that collection of that dairy, the high omega-3 butter builds brain cells. It is food for the brain. So a kid up until 2 years old, like a lot of his calories are going into brain development. And so giving them good, decent, dense calories like from butter and beef and cheese is one of the things I believe, and there's a lot of evidence behind this, has helped our brains become what they have been or what they are today. Over generations, evolution of consuming the cheese and butter essentially. And so when you're feeding your kids margarine or hydrogenated oil or this stuff that came out shortly after World War II, because during World War II you had rationing. And so my grandmother, who grew up, she's originally from New Brunswick, her family, but when she was a little girl, they moved to a border town in Maine, just on the other side of whatever river's up there. And when she was a little girl, I mean, she's 92 years old now, but she was like 6 years old, she would have like a little purse, and her brother and her sister would have like a little bag, and they would go over to Canada, and they would have the kids put in like, some like sausages or cheese, these things that you couldn't get in the U.S. because of the rationing during World War II. And they were like little kids smuggling over a couple of pounds of, butter and meat and kielbasa or whatever.
So I never really
across
thought
the
about
border.
it. So margarine and a bunch of these other products, they were created or they
were
received
created
prominence during the rationing of
Correct.
World War II because you had a set amount of butter that you could have each month or whatever.
Yep.
And that wasn't enough.
Correct.
Okay. I never knew that.
So then later on, Harvard, I believe it was 1976, a scientist from Harvard say fat is bad. Stay away from fat. We got to use this sugar and we got to use these margarine and seed oils. And like margarine is horrible for you. In fact, if you could take some country crock, which is very inexpensive. Next time you're in a grocery store, look at margarine compared to butter. Margarine's like a third of the price.
Yeah, you can get a big tub of that country crock that you're talking, because that's what my grandmother used to always buy. That's what I was raised on.
Right. Yeah, my grandmother did that. One thing I got lucky in life is when my parents got divorced, my dad got hooked up with a woman who was a pharmacist, and she was studying nutrition. So, when I guess he got with her when I was like 4, 5, 6 years old or something. I guess I was 4. And so she was like really good when I was a kid about, we're not going to use margarine, because margarine is
good.
Right. We use butter. And then, so the butter builds brain cells. So then what Harvard did is Harvard basically did this anti-fat crusade, and it was a pro-sugar. And the idea was,
for which they were probably paid by the government to create a particular result.
By the sugar industry, by the sugar lobby. If anybody wants to internet search Harvard, fat, sugar, lobby, you'll find out all these reports.
And there are government grants out there now that are doing exactly this, where the university or the hospital is being told by the government or agency giving them the grant, we'll give you this $50 million grant, but this is the result that you have to produce.
Yeah, the Bill Gates Foundation is huge for this. This is like their thing, buying the science, is what it's referred as.
And if you select the data carefully enough, you can get data to support just about anything. Yep. And this is how they manage to produce scientific data showing that eggs are bad, and then eggs are good again, and then egg yolks are bad, but egg yolks are good again. And they just don't seem to know. And it's because we have all of these conflicting studies that were paid for by people with different interests, telling these hospitals and universities what results to produce.
Years ago, we did an experiment where we took a margarine and we put it out in the woods, behind the house. This was, I don't know, I think my grandmother, somebody, might have been my stepmom who actually had us do this. And then we took regular butter and put it out there. And like the next day, the butter's like covered with ants and there's bugs all over it. And then there's like a little scratch mark or something, in the margarine. And then a couple days later, the butter's all gone. There's no more butter. That margarine was there for all summer. And nothing touched it.
Margarine would not really be something that organisms would recognize generally as food.
Nope. And then you have here in America another thing you have. So New Hampshire, like in Vermont, everybody, the locals all love pure maple syrup. So I say,
I like Mrs. Buttersworth.
Oh yeah. So I say it's a hate crime to not serve pure maple syrup in New Hampshire or Vermont, as a joke.
Sure.
And every now and then you go into some place, you're like, oh, we don't have pure maple syrup. I'm like, I'm in New Hampshire, dude. How could you not have pure maple syrup? But just what you said. I know people that are like, oh, I can't stand maple syrup. Give me that Mrs. Butterworth, which is high fructose corn syrup and water.
It's not good. I've never actually had real maple syrup. I don't actually use Mrs. Buttersworth either because I don't ever cook anything that would require it. I don't make pancakes and waffles and stuff because why would I? I would rather just make an omelet.
Yep.
And you don't put I guess you could put some maple syrup with an omelet. Now, I do want to get some maple syrup for my glazed carrots to occasionally, instead of using brown sugar, use some actual maple syrup. But I haven't acquired any. I do know that maple syrup, it's kind of a big deal.
Yep, it
here
is.
in New Hampshire and Vermont.
Let me tell you a little thing about maple syrup.
There are lines out at the edge of my property where you can see that somebody is collecting the maple. I don't know who's doing the sap. Yes, I don't know who's doing it or what they're doing with it, and I don't really care. It's not my business.
The guy you should buy maple syrup from, whoever that is. You'll figure it out.
Yes, no doubt.
When you're there this spring, next spring.
But our co-host, occasionally on the show, I don't know when the last time he was on, Matt Roach, he would do the same thing with some of the trees here. And I don't think it was actually ever successful, but apparently like maple syrup, real maple syrup, it's a thing here.
So here's the thing with maple syrup. The sap from the tree is about 3 to 5% sugar. So the maple syrup is about 99% sugar, maybe 100% actually. So you got to cook down like 40-ish gallons to get 1 gallon of sap to get 1 gallon of maple syrup. So maple syrup has a complex carbohydrate. Is a complex carbohydrate that is like food for your brain. Allegedly.
I read about some of these in when I was in prison. They're simple carbohydrates, usually like fruit.
Yep.
Would constitute a simple carbohydrate.
So this complex carbohydrate exists at some point in basically all fruit. So for example, it exists in these blackberries at peak ripeness, and as soon as you pick that raspberry off there or it's gone past ripe, that complex carbohydrate starts breaking down. Maple syrup is one of the only ways that it's preserved, just like any other fruit in peak ripeness, and it is a complex carbohydrate that literally feeds your brain. So it's not like one of these simple sugars. Yes, it will still make your glycemic index spike. It is still a sugar. If you have diabetes and stuff, you need to, not just be pounding tons of maple syrup, but maple syrup is really good and good for us.
I'll have to look into acquiring some then, because I've lived in New Hampshire now for long enough where I should be ashamed. I did have a fluffernutter in prison. Now, I imagine you're not a fan of those because it's marshmallow. Yeah, it's marshmallow fluff and peanut butter, but in prison, I didn't have much choice, and I was shocked by how good it actually is. There's more coming up. Here it is, Free Talk Live.
If you're looking for work, it's a process of elimination, and you're trying not to be eliminated. So here's a tip for making the cut, and this might seem subtle, but to the person interviewing you, it's not. There is a world of difference between applicants who convey, "I need a job," and those who simply ooze, "I want to work," especially in these lean times when many you're competing with will seem desperate in "I'll take anything" mode. If you convey specific interest in this job at this company, you will be conspicuous. Thus, the value of going to school on the company you're applying to before the interview. With money and attention so tight now, effective communication skills have never been more important. For more tips for job seekers and everyone else, hit survivalspeech.com. I'm Holland Cook.
From Feature Story News in Washington, I'm Nick Harper. US Vice President Kamala Harris has said Joe Biden's legacy of accomplishments is unmatched in modern history. She spoke at an event at the White House, her first public comments since Biden said he would not seek re-election. Harris did not mention her campaign to become her party's nominee. Instead, she praised Biden and his accomplishments during his 3.5 years in office.
Joe Biden's legacy of accomplishment over the past 3 years is unmatched in modern history. In one term, he has already, yes, you may clap. In one term, he has already surpassed the legacy of most presidents who have served 2 terms in office.
Meanwhile, former House Speaker Nancy Pelosi has endorsed Harris, writing in a statement that she did so with immense pride and limitless optimism for the country's future. She added that her enthusiastic support for Kamala Harris is official, personal, and political. Harris is rallying support as she tries to become the Democrats' nominee after President Biden dropped his re-election bid. Democrats, including Congressman Joaquin Castro, are rallying behind her.
I've been in different conversations already with folks in the Congressional Progressive Caucus, the Hispanic Caucus, and others who are ready to support the vice president. What I've seen among my colleagues so far is overwhelming support for Kamala Harris to be the new presidential nominee.
Meanwhile, President Joe Biden's doctor says his COVID-19 symptoms have almost resolved completely. Biden is scheduled to meet Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu in Washington on Tuesday. Biden remains, though, at his residence in Rehoboth Beach, Delaware, where he's been since last Wednesday. Netanyahu is also expected to meet Vice President Harris during his visit. The director of the U.S. Secret Service, Kimberly Cheatle, has been answering tough questions at a congressional hearing about security failings in the attempted assassination of Donald Trump on July the 13th. Cheatle has pledged to prevent anything like it from happening again, but many lawmakers appeared unconvinced, as FSN's Caroline Malone reports.
Hours and hours of tough questioning, and yet few revelations about why the Secret Service teams at the rally in Butler, Pennsylvania, were not able to stop the shooting before it happened. Secret Service Director Kimberly Cheetle says they have a distinction between suspicious activity and threatening, and the risk level was deemed okay for Trump to take the stage that day. She also talked of consultations between the Secret Service and Trump's campaign staff for 5 days before the event, in reference to questions about why the shooter was able to access a rooftop with a clear shot of the stage that was actually outside the security perimeter. There are now calls for Cheetle to stand down, and investigations into the whole incident continue. Caroline Malone, Washington.
From Bureaus Worldwide, this is FSN.
Don't miss a moment of Free Talk Live. Get our archives daily via our podcast at feeds.freetalklive.com.
Free Talk Live, and there's still time to get on the air with us if you're quick. 603-283-6160. That's 603-283-6160. And of course, that would mean that we would be taking an unscreened call, so you can't say certain things on terrestrial radio. Keep that in mind. We are a radio show, so there's some things you simply cannot say. We do, of course, have a dump button. And if you say something bad, we'll just drop your call and hit that button, which makes the previous 6 seconds of audio get replaced by a toilet sound because we are on a delay. And it's very subtle, but if you listen to the video feeds of the show, you will notice a difference in the pitch of the speaking hosts and in the audio versus what you'll find in the podcast when you re-listen to it and other similar issues like that. And it's because the show is just slowed down ever so slightly in order to create that 6 seconds of delay. And then once it's built, our pitches go back to normal and the music goes back to normal. And you probably never will notice it unless you already know what you sound like. And then you're listening to yourself on Twitch and you're going, why do I sound like that? And you remember, oh, it's because of the delay being built by the dump button. So anyway, if you do something like that, we can just drop your call and hit the dump button. You'll still go out on Twitch and YouTube and all that, but we don't care because those aren't beholden to the FCC. So you can swear on those, but you cannot swear here. 603-283-6160. Jay, before we get into these next two callers, because they could take a considerable amount of time, there was someone you mentioned earlier who had given you a four-wheeler, and they have an issue right now that I feel is worth talking about because this is a member of our Liberty family.
Yeah, he's actually one of the first guys I met at my first Pork Fest.
Wow.
Back in 2007. And this would be Jack Shimak.
And I don't remember his last name. Is this the guy who does Alt Expo?
Yes, Alt Expo.
I thought so. I wasn't completely sure.
So Alt Expo is about including the alternatives at Liberty Forum and Pork Fest.
Right.
So he's done like 30-something Alt Expos or something because he's done basically 2 a year. And some years there wasn't a Liberty Forum, but every Liberty Forum and every Pork Fest, he does an Alt Expo and he has a whole host of speakers and all kinds of cool stuff. And, there's all the alternatives, and a lot of it's like he's really into technology, like your solar and energy stuff and things like that. Anyways, Jack's been a big part of, the Free State Project for a long time. He's been here since before the Free State Project. He moved here because of this, of his libertarian values before the Free State Project even, was a thing. And he's, if you've, been at Pork Fest or Liberty Forum, and seen Alt Expo, you know who I'm talking about. Well, anyways, he had a heart issue. I think he's in his early 70s. I forget exactly how old he is. It might even say it in this thing here. But anyways, this past winter, he was really slowing down and having some trouble. And he goes to the hospital and they're like, oh yeah, you're not, getting proper blood flow, this, that, and the other thing. And he ended up having his, chest, busted open. He's got a big scar there now and stuff. And they put a heart valve in him, an updated heart valve. And then it was a pretty long recovery. He just got done, so when was it, last November he had it done or December? And he just got done here July with like his 2-day a week, cardiac rehab sessions going, to do the therapy. and he was really good about it, really diligent about it, and he's getting around pretty good. And anyways, but it really, beat him up financially, and he's got a bunch of different kinds of bills to pay. There's some medical bills that the thing says like $500,000. Which is just unreasonable.
Healthcare in the United States,
right,
man.
right.
That's what happens when you let the government intervene in it.
Right. All these government regulated industries are very, very expensive. So anyways, it's to give back to Jack at givebutter.com. And Aria, I'll send you a link on somewhere here.
Yeah, please, that way I can share it.
And we've actually reached 88% of the goal. There was a $5,000 goal. So this would help Jack, just get caught up on some things, fix up some stuff on his car. He still works every day.
It's presumably not going to be used to pay the exorbitant hospital bills, presumably?
It won't be used for that from what I understand. But what a lot of it will be used for is there's certain meds that he's got to take now that he's paying cash for. He's pretty proud. He's not going to get on, Social Security or any of that stuff. He doesn't believe in taking any of that. He doesn't want to do that because, he just has values against that.
I only ask because I know that a lot of libertarians are very generous, but they don't want to pay someone else's hospital bills because in general, they would just say, well, don't pay the hospital bill. And because of how hospitals and governments have become so closely intertwined, I have to agree. Just don't pay it.
Right, yeah. And so I had a friend of mine, he had to go to an ER with his kid a few years ago, and he's like, he ain't got no insurance or nothing. And he's like, yeah, he goes, I just gave him a fake name, fake address, nothing that comes back to me, fake phone number. They asked me for ID. I was like, I don't have any on me, and
that's smart. I've never even thought about that.
He's just, I never heard nothing from him again. Kid got a couple of stitches, and, I'm sure, it was, and then I took my son to the hospital. He ate some, we were at a friend's house, and they had one of these sensory tables, and they had wood pellets in it.
Yeah.
And he ate the wood pellets. And then he threw up, and then he threw up again, and I'm like, oh, man. So we decided to bring him to the hospital because he's not feeling good. They take an x-ray, and they go, oh, he's fine. There's nothing in there, nothing going on. I didn't know if something, because that wood pellets can expand, and I was worried about it doing something. And but that bill was $1,145.
Jesus Christ, that's insane.
For 2 X-rays and a couple hours in the ER, and we got and he was fine after we left the and he was feeling really miserable. But after being at the hospital for an hour, he started feeling better. He's running around being himself. We knew he was kind of okay.
As one does after vomiting,
But
it takes a while to recover.
Ended up paying, whatever, $1,100 something bill.
That's crazy. But that's how hospitals are. They charge $900 for a bag of saline.
I was gonna say that sounds like a cheap bill for the ER.
Well, I got this scar right here. I got beat up by a cow last year, and I got 8 stitches in the side of my head. And the ER was I was in and out. I was in there for maybe 45 minutes, which is in and out for an ER.
Yeah.
And so I start getting bills, and it's $2,700 worth of stuff. So I get one bill for $1,100. I'm from the hospital. I'm like, oh, that's a lot of money for a couple of stitches, but it's better than having a big gaping gash in the side of my head for the rest of my life. All ugly scar. And then they sent me the bill for this thing and then that thing, and they just keep on just piling this stuff on, and all of a sudden it's $2,500.
The way it worked in Mississippi was the hospital would send you a bill, but then the doctor himself would also send you a bill, and both of those were just insanely expensive.
Yep.
It's a complete racket.
Yeah.
So this is Give Back to Jack.
Oh, yes.
And people can find it at givebutter.com.
Givebutter.com. And, it's going to, just help him out, straighten some things out, with his life. He's, he basically just couldn't work for multiple weeks, and he got, backed up in some, things, and some people lent him some money. Some people lent him money and said, Jack, I don't need it back. And some people lent him money and said, Jack, I do need it back. And, and Jack's always been super helpful. He's even this week, this past weekend, he invited some fella.
Getbutter.com, is that right?
Givebutter.com.
All right, thank you.
And
I know you'll send me a link. I'm just adding it to the show notes here.
And he always is willing to take time out. He took a couple of days off of work this week or last week, and he showed a potential new mover. A guy from Pennsylvania wants to get out of the Philadelphia area. He's got a couple of buildings down there. He sold a few more to sell, and he wants to come to New Hampshire and buy for the Free State movement. And he wants to buy some properties, and because he's got money to to use that he's got down there. And Jack's been doing that ever since I've known him. He's just been like your personal guide and he's done a lot to get people here. I've often said like that Ian Freeman's like the number one puller of people into the Free State Project, and Jack is like right behind him because he doesn't have the big radio show Ian's had for all these years, but he's in the forums, he's in the Facebook groups, and he's constantly putting events together, Pine Tree Radio Club, all this like science things. I'm actually trying to get him to hopefully this winter teach part of our homeschool co-op to some of the young kids with little chipboard things and stuff, things that he's into, learning about electronics and stuff like that, because he's good with all that stuff, and he's really great with kids. He's got like the best grandpa energy, and he hangs out with my kids now and then, and they love Uncle Jack, and he's a lot of fun. But yeah, if we could give back to Jack, he's given a lot to this freedom community, and that'd be really good.
And thank you for that. I will share the link on our social media and on our Twitter and Facebook and all of the other places where you can find Free Talk Live. But let's go to the phones because we do have Skeeter calling in. Skeeter, you are on Free Talk Live. What's on your mind tonight?
Isn't donating to Jack just another form of welfare and subsidies for a bad lifestyle that led to a heart attack? But I wanted to talk about that. I want to talk about rulers,
It actually isn't.
We need rulers.
Yeah, it's not, definitely.
And well, hold on a second,
what's
Skeeter.
the difference, Jay?
Yeah, here's the difference.
Sovereign citizen difference?
I'll let Chris say the difference. I've been talking a lot.
Yeah, so one is charity, and people are giving them their money voluntarily, and the other is use of force to redistribute wealth.
Welfare is taxes are taken with, and if you don't pay your taxes, they use threats of violence and force. Like, I didn't pay some property taxes years ago, and SWAT team showed up at my house at 5:45 in the morning to remove me from it. So that's that's the difference.
Same thing happened with the studio, Free Talk Live studio, and Ian Freeman. So and
except at the time there were no tax charges.
I don't know. Yeah, I don't know. You didn't have any tax charges either, right?
This was property tax I didn't pay.
Yeah. Okay. So and Aria, and there was some other people as well. So.
Yeah. So go ahead, Skeeter.
Yeah, it's still a subsidy for bad lifestyle choices. But I wanted to talk about rulers. We need rulers, right?
I agree. Otherwise, it's really difficult to build a desk if you don't know what a foot is or a meter or whatever. Like being able to measure those things is super helpful. Yeah.
How else are we supposed to draw a straight line, right? But seriously, society needs rulers at the expense of liberty. Liberty is not something you maximize. Not only do we sometimes need not know what's good for ourselves because value is not subjective. Like with children, remember that area? You couldn't resolve that, huh? But we act in ways that have consequences to others in society, and those actions sometimes needs correcting. Like allowing people to build a nuclear power plant on their residential property. Are you going to allow that in Ancapistan or pollute on their property? Who owns the air? How far above the land you homesteaded do you own?
You ask a lot of questions there. So basically the answer to that is that if somebody is on their own property, absolutely, I would let them build a nuclear reactor on their property. It's not my property. What do I care?
The problem, let's clarify this a little bit. So your rights stop where somebody else's start, right? So if you open a dump and the runoff ends up polluting somebody else's property, there's a problem.
Yeah.
Right.
But then you're polluting their property.
How's it a problem?
Right. So it's but if that doesn't happen, right, and you run that dump properly and everything, there's not a problem.
How about this? Let me give you another scenario, right? What about, let's say you guys are Taiwan, right? Would you allow people to sell their land to Xi Jinping to build military bases?
This is not a question I can even answer, dude. I am not Taiwan, and I cannot put myself in the mindset of being this imaginary entity. You mean the...
Yeah, you can.
No. You mean the state of Taiwan, the government ruling over Taiwan, and what they may or may not allow their people to do. And I cannot put myself in the mindset of being this fictitious entity that is determining what other people can and cannot do. That is so counter to my nature that I cannot put myself in that mindset because, first of all, no such agency, no such entity exists. You say, well, and Matt, you are Taiwan. What the hell does that mean? Taiwan is the name of a place on a map.
I mean, and the other thing here is these are some pretty absurd examples anyway, or extremes. I mean that even if we're almost 99.95% right, it's like, okay, so we're wrong 0.5% of the time. I mean, that's still got to be better than, the rest, whatever you're suggesting, right?
I mean, there's always a gotcha that people love to throw at me.
Yeah.
And I saw this a lot when I was
like
actually making YouTube videos where someone would say, well, yes, okay, so in Kapistan, what about your neighbor? He would just have more money and he'd hire a military to come and enslave you or whatever. And I'm like, okay, yeah, that's always a possibility. But it's a possibility now. Right now, we have this thing called the American government that has the most money and the biggest and most powerful military. What is stopping them from coming and enslaving me?
Yeah, nobody has a solution for everything, right? Like,
right, and we shouldn't have to point out that the current system sucks and it's untenable.
Right. You can have a underlying philosophy that works 99.5% of the time and still end up having, something that doesn't work this very small percentage of the time. And it doesn't, and it may be that you can get to 100% at some point, but it's not going to happen overnight.
Well, when someone starts demanding that, they're not looking for explanations. They're not looking for arguments. They're looking for ways to justify writing off your position because you can't solve every little contingency that they can think of to throw at you. And that's not a reasonable way to consider an idea. If you want to consider an idea, then do so by saying, but what if this extremely obscure possibility happens? I happen to have majored in physics briefly when I was in college, and I can imagine what it would take to have a nuclear reactor in your house. And it's beyond the technical capabilities, it's beyond the financial capabilities of anyone I've ever met.
So there are a bunch of private nuclear reactors all over the place. They're considered experimental reactors. They're in many universities and colleges.
Are you talking about the mini reactors that are developing?
There's all kinds of stuff.
Or you're talking about like university?
Like there's a bunch of universities that run nuclear reactors.
And it wouldn't take a huge one to power your house.
I was just going to say, because they have they're developing mini nuclear reactors for developments, maybe 500 houses or something like that.
And then my father-in-law, he worked, and actually nuclear is super safe. So I know a handful of dudes that are in their 70s and their 80s that worked in nuclear power plants, and they're fine. Like if there was a problem, these guys wouldn't be around. So my father-in-law, 74 years old, I think he is, or 73. He worked over the Portsmouth, Seacoast, Seabrook power plant for 15, 20 years. He actually helped get some power plants fired up and going over in Italy and Europe when my wife was like a little kid who lived in Italy for a little while. And that's what his career, for 35 years, he was in nuclear power plants, almost every day. And he really likes this, and I'm not exactly sure what I'm talking about right now, but I'm going to repeat what he says, thorium reactors, which is a type of technology that if you walk away from it, it basically just shuts down to where what we understand as Chernobyl or these, 3 Mile Island type disaster things where these nuclear power plants constantly have to have attention given to them. You can't just walk away from them. You got to keep them cool.
It's ancient nuclear technology. And my understanding is a lot of the newer technology, it's actually because of people who are anti-nuclear energy want to get rid of it. They won't allow more safer, newer technology, newer generation nuclear reactors to actually be developed, or I'm sorry, not maybe developed, but introduced. So you end up extending. What happens is we end up extending these more dangerous older designs. We extend the life of them, and so it's wait a minute, that's the opposite of what we should be doing. We should be replacing these older.
It's like taking this Model
safe
T Ford and be like, we're just going to keep on, stacking wheels on it and putting more seats on it.
right. And it's kind of funny because even if it was safe for the first 40 years, it may not be safe for the next 40 years. But that's what we're doing rather than actually replacing it with something safer.
So for those listening out there, I want to assure you there's nothing wrong with your speakers or with the live stream. That was just Skeeter in the background through most of that, laughing and making random noises. And probably shouting. I had him turned down a little bit lower at this time than I did last time, but I guess thank you for the call tonight, Skeeter. If you ever want to have a real conversation about some of these things, we can do it. But you show your hand when you lead with questions like that. You want me to solve this extremely unlikely problem that you've imagined up, right? Your question begins with me imagining that I'm an entire country. This is not a realistic question to be asking of any human being. You're not looking for an answer. You're looking for a justification of what you're predisposed to already believe. And I'm not going to try to reason with someone who's in that mindset.
If anybody out there is listening is like pro-nuclear power or into nuclear, and all these guys that I know about 24 guys who've worked in nuclear power plants or power plants in general, and they all like love it. In fact, one friend, he was we were somewhere years ago, and they're like, "Oh, would you like a nuclear power plant behind your house?" He's like, "Oh, you could put it right under my bed. I would be fine with it."
Well, let's keep going.
I'm not. What's funny is I'm not even like pro-nuclear, but it just seems so absurd. And I think I think you could argue that there's probably like legitimate concerns that people have, but it's.
Well, probably, but let's keep going because we do also have David on the line from New Mexico, who is a fresh of breath air after dealing with Skeeter. David, what's on your mind tonight?
Finally, a step up.
Yeah, I appreciate it. It's nice to hear from you after the guy who has both threatened to murder me and rape me. So that's not you. You're doing better than that.
That's not me. I didn't do it.
You did
not.
not.
I'm even going to talk about physics. And so, Arya, since you studied physics in college, do you remember who won the Nobel Prize for Physics in 1939 for inventing the cyclotron, which went on to become the Large Hadron Collider?
I don't know. Who was that?
My cousin Ernie.
Okay.
Ernest Orlando Lawrence, my cousin, or cousin of my grandfather.
Okay, cool. That's a neat little factoid, I guess.
Well, it's important. I mean, the Large Hadron Collider is doing all kinds of cool stuff. And
it does seem to be.
And actually, I didn't even think of this. There was even an allegation that they were having satanic rituals in the Hadron Collider space.
Yeah, I mean, and it seems to have been like demonstrated as proof that they were in fact doing that. And like they came out, CERN, of course, who owns the Large Hadron Collider, came out and said something to the effect of, "Oh yeah, but we were just joking around." But like that's a lot of effort to go through to be joking around, and I need more of an explanation than that. Like as much of a troll as I am, I would do it. Right? If I was the head of CERN, I'd be like, hey, these people think we're Satanists and that we're trying to open up a dimension to hell so that we can bring in a bunch of demons. So let's do this Bohemian Grove thing.
Oh, wait, I think I understand what he's saying. They were responding because there's religious like cults out there that are making out as if it's the devil, so they're kind of worshiping the devil in response because it's funny.
Well, that's what CERN said. Well, they didn't say that they did it because it was funny. They said something to the effect
or
of,
it was an inside joke, basically.
They were like, we were just messing around and having fun or whatever. And like as a troll, I would do that, but I don't think most people would carry trolling to that level. So I don't know. Did
they
excuse
actually
for that,
do it, or did they just say they did it?
No, they did it. There's video. There's at least pictures.
Like
of
there's
them
actual
online.
video of it.
Yes, of scientists from CERN.
That sounds really hilarious.
Doing this, Bohemian Grove looking thing out there, dressed in black robes and like looking evil and satanic. It's not a good look at the very least. But yeah, they did it, and I don't remember exactly what their explanation was, but it was something to the effect of, "Oh, we were just having a good time."
Yeah, it was probably a PR stunt to detract from something actual evil instead of the way these things work out.
I could definitely see either Satanists or people who are not religious doing this just because it's
I would do it. Right?
I'm not. Yeah, I am not.
But I'm a troll.
Right, and I think it's funny, but for more of a somebody who isn't a religious person kind of angle, I just think it's atheist, more of like an atheist kind of angle. I think it's hilarious.
Yeah. What else, David? You got a minute?
Yeah. The one helpful hint to those that would be so inclined over the years, as part of my home medical kit, I've collected suture kits with the little needle on the end of it and the suture thread. So I have it ready at home to do it self-service.
To give
in
yourself
addition to
stitches
that-
in case that's necessary?
You can put about 200
Yeah.
of those in your pocket, by the way. Those suture kits are very compact.
Okay.
Yeah.
That is
Yeah.
good
And
advice.
then,
I mean, sorry, David, I got to end you there because we are at the end of the show. That is good advice. I'd be a little hesitant about giving myself stitches.
Can I have somebody else give me stitches?
Yes.
I don't see why not.
Yeah, like that seems like a much better idea.
Yeah, but
I'm actually good at it.
is it, I mean, how painful is that?
It hurts.
Yeah, all right. Well, this has been Free Talk Live. You can find us online in the meantime at freetalklive.com. So definitely check that out. And definitely check us out on Patreon. It's Free Talk Live.
Free Talk Live.
Just because we may believe what we say doesn't mean you should trust everything that we say either. You may love Free Talk Live. You may think Free Talk Live is the best show you've ever heard. But that doesn't mean that you should trust us. You don't know us. You know us from what you hear us talk about on the radio, and sometimes that can make you think that you know a talk show host. It might make you feel like you're best friends with that talk show host. You're listening 18 hours a week. You know what they talk about on their show. You must know what they're really like in real life, but you don't really know that. And that's the reality of talk radio. I'm sorry.